And welcome in to the Dorton and Duckett Debate Podcast. I am Lucas Dorton. That, very obviously, is not Nick Duckett. That is Caleb Stipe. You probably have seen him on the show a few times in the past, much like Josh Milling, who was on episode 70. Both of these guys come on, it seems like every year right around the draft. So thank you, Caleb, once again for joining me. How are you doing?
Doing great. Looking forward to talking some draft, talking some ball. It's the perfect merger of the college football and professional football worlds. Love it.
Yep. Great time of the year. It's like I always say, it's probably my favorite sporting event that isn't actual sports being played at the time.
Now, would you put it over the NBA trade deadline?
I think I would, because there have been some years where the NBA trade line has thrown out some duds where it's like nothing happens.
This is true.
NFL draft is always hype. Always hype.
And the MLB trade deadline, I feel like, has got diluted a little bit later with those trades happening earlier in July.
A little bit, yeah. You don't get the thrill of, it's an hour to the deadline blockbuster trade coming through much anymore, unfortunately.
Nice.
But
Here we go. Most exciting non-athletic sporting event.
I agree. Also, what's that?
Now, where would you rank the WNBA draft?
Moving on. Before we get going, though, folks, something is a little bit different this time around than years past. My co-host today with us, ladies, I'm sorry, is taken for sure off the table. Throw up the X's. This is an engaged man. So from myself, obviously, was at your engagement party last weekend, and that was a great time. Thanks for having me. She was definitely very surprised. But definitely congrats to you again, man. That's awesome. And certainly, wished well for you with all that.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Greatest signing in the history of free agent signings, maybe ever.
I can't think of one that would top it.
Reggie White and Charles Woodson are scrubs compared to my fiance.
Not even in the same stratosphere. Not even in the same stratosphere.
He's probably not even going to listen to this.
Well, we're doing this in case she does. Give you a few more brownie points.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely. But anyways, folks, we're going to move on here. Talk some NFL draft. A lot of years, maybe minus last year, it seems like there was a pretty consensus number one pick every year. And for a long time leading up to this draft, I think there probably was a consensus number one. And now probably this last month, that has completely shifted. So I would love to hear Caleb Stipe, Carolina Panthers. Obviously, remember, folks, the Bears initially had this pick, and they made that trade with the Panthers to move up to number one. Bears getting DJ Moore as well, kind of the big name in that deal in the process. But Carolina Panthers, number one, who do you have?
The Carolina Panthers, I believe, traded up so that they could get one guy. They had one guy in mind this whole time. They watched the USFL draft. They know how bad this guy is wanted by the the Michigan Panthers. Yes, two Panthers teams selecting him. Obviously, the number one pick here has to be Tanner Morgan. What he did for that Minnesota offense.
Whoa!
I told you there was one.
My. Well, I wonder what the betting odds on that. Shoot.
I think there's probably about as good of a chance of you or I getting drafted into the CFL next year. No, I mean, there's really, I see three options that they could go with, that being Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson. I don't buy the Anthony Richardson hype for that number one pick that we saw for a little bit.
Sure.
When it comes down to it, he's a quarterback who completed I got it right here, 54.7% of his passes in college. Freak athlete, should still go top five. but you're telling me you gave up all of that to pick a project quarterback? I'm not buying it. I think they go with a guy who I'm also not sold on, but has shades of Russell Wilson. That would be Bryce Young, the also short quarterback, the 5'10" quarterback from Alabama. He won the Heisman. He was the AP College Football Player of the Year a year ago. Consensus All-American in 21. We did see a little bit of a regression this past year as his touchdown totals dropped by 12. He threw for 47 in 2021 compared to just 32 this year. He did see those interception numbers decrease a little bit from 7 to 5, and those passing yards took a huge hit, dropping 1,500 yards. Based on what we saw from Alabama, they weren't as good of a team as they were in 2021. But we saw Bryce Young making plays. I think specifically that Texas game, which Texas should have won. That was a terrible call. Bryce Young was sacked for a safety. Texas wins the ball game.
Yeah.
But the way he drove out, he didn't have to all the time take over in 2021 because he could just do kind of the, all right, receivers down there somewhere, chuck it up. This year, the receiver talent wasn't quite as good at Alabama, and he still was able to will them to victory. And so I think seeing that, you kind of ignore the warning signs of him only being, and I still question the combine official 5'10". I mean, we'll find out, but I got the Panthers taking him there.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with you on that, and then you kind of hit the point that I wanted to bring up was the height thing. I think it was 5'9" was kind of the reported one. Combine came out 5'10". Now, I don't know what's going on there. Who knows how tall he is? Is an inch gonna matter? Maybe, maybe not.
Doesn't.
But what's that? Yeah. Moving on. I think an interesting statistic that somebody brought up, I believe Russell Wilson, who's around the same height. I can't
No.
remember if it was his last year in college or this last year in the NFL. I think it was his last year in college. He had only three tip passes. He comes in a similar height. Bryce Young only had two this last year. So definitely had some behemoths on that O line in Alabama as well too, for sure. So yeah, I mean, I think one thing you got to remember as well too, Bryce Young can run. He's very shifty, obviously. I don't. That's definitely not his preference. You're not going to usually see him run first, much like Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson is not a run first player. He's just if he has to and he can, he probably will, and he probably will get it. Now, Panthers probably aren't going to have a good offensive line. So then it comes into question with the size that he comes in at is an injury thing. Is he going to have to run around too much, kind of like Justin Fields the last couple of years? There's a reason why we've only seen Justin Fields rushing highlights is because he can't throw the ball. He can't throw the ball right now.
The difference,
So
though, is I think having Kim Ekwonu at the left tackle position gives him some protection on his backside,
yeah,
which Justin Fields, honestly, I couldn't name you, or I could name you two players on their offensive line, that being Dakota Dozier and Riley Reef, both of
yeah,
them ex-Vikings, or I think they have Tevin Jenkins as well. Overall, not a great line.
right, right. So I think Bryce going number one to the Panthers, I still think is the right call here. Um, a lot of people have bought into the Richardson hype. Obviously, we'll dive into that pick and that player shortly here, I'm sure, for the both of us. But Bryce Young probably going number one overall. I think that's a pretty safe bet for that. And he's not going to a terrible team. Obviously, they have Adam Thielen there, lost DJ Moore, but Miles Sanders is there, pretty decent guy to the backfield as well. Obviously, they just signed him in free agency. So and a very, very good defense as well too. Panthers have a very, very solid defense. Um, I don't know how well the Panthers are still going to do. I still don't think they're a playoff team by any means, but I don't think they're going to be as bad as a lot of people may think. Remember, obviously they had the 9 overall pick initially, and then swapped with the Bears there for that. But um, I get glad to see that we're both in agreement on that initial pick there.
Like we're about to go like 4 for 4 on the first 4, potentially even 5 straight.
Very possible. Very possible. So now moving to pick number 2. Very interesting. Houston Texans here had the 2nd overall pick. Now, you talk just about to anybody of maybe the last 2 weeks ago, CJ Stroud is probably going to be the number 2 quarterback. And the conversation before that was, well, whichever quarterback goes 1, Houston's going to get it 2. About this last week, they've been talking that may not even go for a quarterback. So personally, I don't see that happening. I think Houston absolutely needs a quarterback here. I get it. D'Amico Ryan's coming in as a defensive guy. You know that you got to build the defense, but do you pass on a CJ Stroud potentially if we think, or Anthony Richardson here at 2, and then they pick again at 12, assuming they don't trade. You hope for a Will Levis, a Hendon Hooker. At that point, you probably don't go quarterback, and then you're rolling your dice on next year's draft class with Caleb Williams and Meg from North Carolina there coming out as well. I think those are probably going to be the consensus 1 and 2, depending on what order you look at. I think that's a massive gamble to take. So Stroud's there too, or Bryce Young, or one of the other quarterbacks like Richardson. Probably take him. So what do you think Houston does here at 2?
Houston, I think you just stick with it. You go with CJ Stroud. He's got the size. He's 6'3", 214 pounds. He's been the Big Ten Offensive Player of the Year and Quarterback of the Year the past 2 years. He's thrown an absolutely absurd 85 touchdowns to just 12 interceptions in the past 2 seasons, with just over 8,000 yards, completing just over 69% of his passes. And granted, here's the one knock on Ohio State quarterbacks. A lot of his top targets were 5-star receivers, right, including Jackson Smith and Jigba, and Marvin Harrison Jr., who's in the conversation for the top 5, 10 next year.
Yeah.
He does have weapons. And does Houston have any weapon close to that? No. I think they might take one for him later in the draft, but I think he's got the size, he's got the skill. He's shown that he's not afraid of competition. He will stick around and fight it out. I remember back in 2021, going into the season opener against Minnesota, there was some talk, okay, how quickly could Quinn Ewers be ready? And Kyle McCord was also there. And it felt like CJ Stroud was an afterthought in that quarterback room. He won the position battle. And even in that first game, they struggled a little bit against Minnesota. They ended up winning by, I believe, 2 scores, maybe 3 scores. But it was a close game for most of it until Mohamed Ibrahim went out. There were still people that were like, is CJ Stroud the guy? And to his credit, he's stepped up and shown that he is the guy. Yep. I'll always question an Ohio State quarterback until one actually pans out as a quarterback. But I think he's got the size, he's got the tape. You take him there.
Yep. And I think that's, you brought up another point too, and that's a real thing too. People are that, the Ohio State quarterback thing. So far, we haven't seen an Ohio State quarterback really do anything. Now, is that necessarily fair for CJ Stroud that that's the case? No, it isn't. It isn't. He obviously is not what the other players before him are. But you're right. I mean, this is the big thing a lot of people have to remember. They are not going to good organizations. There is a reason the Texans are picking number 2 overall. There's a massive reason why that's the case. And that's because they are not a good football team. So, CJ Stroud, a lot of people have to remember coming in probably the first 2, 3 years aren't going to be really all that of a competitive team. You just hope that, he's able to show, okay, this is a guy that we can build around. This is a guy that can be our future quarterback for the next, 10, 15 years. And if that's the case, that's great. So definitely an important thing to remember for that. So now third overall pick here is the Arizona Cardinals. What do you have going on here at 3?
Yeah, so I don't think there's really any option here. I think you take best player available, who's potentially the best player in this whole draft. A guy who, if the two teams in front and like in 1 and 2 didn't have such a bad need for quarterback, and I could still see, I think it is kind of a smokescreen that the Texans are even considering not taking a quarterback. But
Yeah.
if they quarterback, I would look at Will Anderson Jr. out of Alabama right there. Just over 6'3", 253 pounds, ran a 4.6 40. He's a 2-time Nagurski Award winner, 2-time SEC Defensive Player of the Year, 2-time consensus All-American. He has 58 and a half tackles for loss in the past 3 years, and 34 and a half of those being sacks. This dude is a monster. And he had 101 tackles in 2021. Did take a step back this year with just 51 tackles, but he still had 17 tackles for loss. I mean, there was no way he was topping that 2021 campaign where he had 101 tackles, 31 for 17 and a half sacks. That's your career year right there. And for some players, that is your career. For some decent players, that is your career. So Will Anderson, super productive, super athletic, knows how to get after the quarterback and just the ball carrier in general behind the line of scrimmage. I think that is a huge piece for an Arizona defense that just needs to start adding dudes. They've tried it with Isaiah Simmons a couple of years ago. Didn't quite pan out. They take a linebacker every year, so maybe this year they go specialized more with that edge rusher and Will Anderson Jr. to get some pressure on your quarterbacks. Actually, the NFC West is pretty lacking in quarterback talent outside of Kyler Murray now. So you still need a good pass rusher.
And we got to remember Kyler Murray will probably miss most of the season with torn ACL as well, too.
That's true.
But so I typically in the past, if you folks that are watching, listening, are pass returners, that we thank you for that. But we usually don't do trades in this mock draft thing. I decided to change up. I'm going to do some trades just because, might as well see what happened. I think 1,000% a trade is going to happen here. I think there are a few teams that need a quarterback that are lower down to where if they pick to where they're going to pick, you may not have a great option at quarterback to pick. However, I think the team that is trading up is not all that far behind Arizona in the pick standings. So I actually have the Indianapolis Colts trading up here one spot. Colts are at 4. I have them trading up to 3 to get their quarterback. I think there's a very big possibility Tennessee could trade up to that spot. I could see happening. Get a guy. I don't know if he starts. You Tannehill there, obviously, but a guy that you can sit under Tannehill. I think the Malik Willis experiment is pretty much done. I don't think they're really doing anything with that anymore, unfortunately. But there's also been talk that the Las Vegas Raiders could potentially trade up to that number 3 spot and get a quarterback, which they just got Jimmy G. So that one I don't know if I see happening, but that's a real. I've seen a lot of mock drafts. A lot of people think Raiders could trade up to that 3 spot and get a quarterback. I, however, think the Indianapolis Colts are the team of those 3 that I have mentioned that need a quarterback the most. I think we can all agree this is a roster the last few years that if you have a competent quarterback there, they're a decent team. I mean, they are a really good team, really solid defense. some decent people on the offensive side of the ball. O-line kind of struggled this last year, but in the past, O-line probably one of the top in football, but they were just a quarterback away. I mean, they made the playoffs with Phillip Rivers in his last year in the NFL. Carson Wentz experiment really didn't work. That came down to the last year, and then they lost to Jacksonville. And then the Matt Ryan experiment really didn't work in Indianapolis.
You remember how they did the Vikings?
Yeah, brutal.
Great game to watch. The second
I
half.
think, yes, absolutely. So I think the Indianapolis Colts 1,000% have to get a quarterback, and if they are content with being at 4, then you got to have some very strong insight, assuming that nobody else trades up to 3 to get a quarterback. So I think they trade up to 3, and I think they go Anthony Richardson. I think as far as potential goes, I think his ceiling is incredibly through. I think he has the highest ceiling out of anyone in this draft. I just think he's very, very solid. Now, I am a Florida Gators fan. I watch on Anthony Richardson, and you look at his stats, and it is not appealing. He doesn't have the stats at YU. That's a very accurate thing. Threw for over 2,500 yards, 17 touchdowns, 9 picks, but rushed for 654 yards and 9 touchdowns on 6.3 yards a carry there for the Gators. Now you look at those stats, not overwhelming stats, but then you got to remember this Florida Gators team, terrible. Anthony Richardson was their offense. You could not have a receiver separate. There was no separation from any of the receivers this last year. So then you really got to throw a lot of jump balls and a lot of, well, hopefully you get it because no one else is open. And that kind of resulted into the not as high passer rating and percentage and led to a few more of the picks. So I think a lot of people use the word project with Anthony Richardson, which fair, but also I don't think he's all that big of a project as a lot of people think. I just think the offense that Billy Napier was throwing out there was terrible. And the guys just were not as good. So I think that put him in Indianapolis, new head coach, Shane Steichen wants to get his guy. I think this is going to be his guy. Absolutely wowed at the combine, put up fantastic just statistical numbers at the combine. Now I will say a couple knocks to him. Sometimes his feel isn't the best, but again, when you have to hold on to the ball a long time because no one's open, it's going to be tough to have that feel. So that's kind of, I think, the big thing with him. But I really like Anthony Richardson. I think he's a fantastic talent, and I think, like I said, highest ceiling in the draft. I think potential could be a massive boom player, but so we'll see what happens. But yeah, I have Richardson at 3 going to the Colts. What do you have? Oh yeah, sorry, you had Will Anderson. My bad. So do you also think it's a potential that the Cardinals trade out of that 3 pick?
Yeah, so I did mine without trades.
Yep.
I could see after Young and Stroud, I'm not sold enough on Richardson or Levis to give up extra draft capital to move up a few spots. And you'll see this play out in some picks I have made by later teams. I think you either stay put or you look at next year with Williams and May and Jordan Travis. Next year's quarterback class has a lot more. I mean, it's easy to say the grass is greener on the other side, but just looking at it right now, I would say that next year's quarterback class is going to be superior to this year's quarterback class. So I could see the Cardinals staying put there, taking their edge rusher and Will Anderson. But I mean, if the right team calls and offers the right price to overpay for Richardson or Levis, of course you do it. I just don't know if there's going to be, outside of Richardson, I don't think there's going to be that kind of demand for Will Levis. And I'm not 100% sold that there's going to be that kind of demand for Richardson, because if he falls past Arizona, the Colts will, or if he falls past 3, Colts are probably taking him at 4. If the Colts, for some reason, go Will Levis, then you probably have him going to Seattle at number 5. So I don't think he falls out of the top 5. I just don't know if he's worth giving up the kind of capital that we've seen these top 5 picks get traded for.
So you're okay. So if the Colts, you're standing firm. If you're Arizona, you're standing firm unless you get a thing that wows you, trade request that wows you.
Offer that's a top 10 pick this year with a first round pick next year. And
Oh, you do another first next year too.
oh yeah, I mean, if I'm the Cardinals, I'm sitting there looking, okay, Kyler Murray's future was shaky this past year. Now he's hurt all next year. We should probably get an extra pick for next year in case we do have to move up and go with a new quarterback next year.
Mm. I
Plus, you
think
have
it's
Murray, who just left to go and be the well, he was fired, but or no, was he fired or retired? It was
who was that you said?
Cliff Kingsbury. They fired
Yeah,
him.
I think it was like a
Yeah.
mutual. Yeah.
It was May they contemplated retirement. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of those young guys. But now Kingsbury is at USC with Lincoln Riley, and he's coaching up Caleb Williams. So
Yep.
Caleb Williams his stock's gonna climb even more. And I think I would take Caleb Williams over anyone in this draft class easily at the quarterback position. And Drake May, I'd probably put Drake May right behind Caleb Williams ahead of everybody else in this class. Next year is where it's at for a quarterback.
So I don't, and we'll get to this pick obviously right, in a shortly here, just because it is the next pick here, because you will have the Colts picking it for. To me, and this was kind of my thought process behind it for Arizona, why, especially for like Indianapolis Colts. I think if the Colts come calling, I think you strongly have to consider it. The reason why I think that is just because, okay, you're going down one spot. You'd still be able to get Will Anderson if that's the thing. And so that was kind of my thought process behind that. If the Titans come calling at 11, obviously Will Anderson more than likely is not going to be there. If the Raiders called it 7, potential for maybe a Jalen Carter at 7. I don't know if he drops that far, but they've said Jalen Carter is only talking to teams in the top 10, which Eagles have the 10th overall pick. So to me, that says he's already had a conversation with the Eagles that if you are there at 10, we're taking you.
That would stupid
now,
good.
Obviously, we'll get to that pick. What'd you say?
Jalen Carter paired with Jordan Davis in Philadelphia. That's Williams Wall 2.0.
Yeah. So that's just my thought process on it. And then I don't know. I think next year, though, I think it is pretty consensus. Caleb Williams, unless he has an awful year, probably number 1 overall pick. May probably number 2 overall pick. And if you want to get a quarterback next year, I think the price is going to be really, really expensive. And just because I don't know if there really will be that, okay, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud 1 and 2. Okay, well, you could still gamble on a Richardson, gamble on a Levis. I think it's pretty, Williams May up here. Next guy, I think there's a pretty decent gap. I'm trying to think who comes out for quarterbacks next year.
Probably Jordan Travis is going to be there, sitting there like number 3. And if he can turn things around, he had an off year this past year, but he really, I don't know how much you can hold that against him. I mean, we'll find out this year. Other than that, I'm blanking right now. I'm running through them all in my head. Quinn Ewers probably is going to be up there.
Yeah.
He's got pressure now with Arch Manning sitting behind him. Does he really want to come back for another year after this year?
Yeah. And so that's my thought with the Colts. Do you not go a quarterback at 4?
Are you
Get
saying wait for Arch?
get just well, what I was thinking is then if the Colts, like, do you not get a quarterback at 4, get best player available at that point in time, and then, gamble out there with Sam Ellinger, at quarterback, and probably suck really bad and then hope you're able to get 1 and 2? Maybe, but that's a big risk. That is a massive risk, and I think that's why you gotta trade up to secure a quarterback, really good one at 3.
But if you are the Colts, you're sitting there at number 4. If somebody trades up for number 3, they can't take Anthony Richardson and Will Levis. And there was a lot of talk at like the combine that Will Levis might be the guy for the Colts.
Oh, I'm not a Levis guy. I'm not a Levis guy.
I'm not as well, but if you're the Colts, there's potential
Yeah.
there. Is he
Yeah.
really going to? Is Anthony Richardson really that much more pro ready than Will Levis that you give up extra capital to move up one spot?
I mean, I would argue yes. Maybe there's a little bias behind that on my end, obviously, but
I respect it. I did say
but
Tanner going number 1 overall.
right, right, right. Anyways, we'll move on to this. So 4th overall pick here, obviously, is where the Colts are currently slated to pick at. Who do you have them going with it for?
I'm going with Anthony Richardson right
Okay.
there.
Yeah.
Levis number 3. I think for everything you said, super good athlete.
Yeah.
Potentially the greatest numbers we've ever seen a quarterback put up at the combine. He's 6'4", 244. He has a next gen athletics score of 99 out of
Oh,
100. I believe it's out of 100. It might be out of 99. Either way, 99 or 100. There's really not going to be anyone better than him as far as athleticism goes at the quarterback position anytime soon. I'm I'm racking my brain of like anyone that's that athletic in college usually gets moved to wide receiver. I'm thinking like your Terrell Pryor,
mm,
um, Braxton Miller, like your Ohio State guys. Super good athletes. They were able to get away with just chucking the ball up to super talented receivers. Um, but he does have an arm. I mean,
he's got a cannon.
Josh Allen potential maybe, but
Okay.
better on his feet because Josh Allen did have some of those same accuracy issues
Yep.
coming out of Wyoming.
Yep.
Also had a similar completion percentage. Uh, Also a big dude. I could see that. And I think Anthony Richardson's athleticism surpasses Josh Allen. I don't think it's even really much of a debate. Josh Allen's not out there running a 4.43 40. So
Right.
if you're the Colts, you're sitting there thinking, if we have a quarterback coach or an offensive coordinator that we can think can help Anthony Richardson focus in, and they don't have terrible receivers with Michael Pittman Jr. and Alec Pierce there.
Yeah.
You got some weapons right there. Maybe you draft another guy. Maybe you sign someone to get a nice little trio there. You've got Jonathan Taylor in the backfield. Maybe get some read option going with Richardson and Taylor. I think, yeah, Richardson at number 4, it just makes sense right there. He does have some questions, but he's got probably the highest upside. Actually, not probably. He has the highest upside of any quarterback in this draft, and you can't just pass up on that at number 4.
I agree. Josh Allen, that's a very solid comp. One that I've seen a lot that I definitely agree with is Cam Newton. I think he's gotten a lot of Cam Newton highlights. Cam Newton was also very big, mobile, could throw the ball. I think I
Also
think
played in Florida until he got kicked out for stealing a laptop.
he did go
Allegedly.
to Florida. Allegedly. Allegedly. Um, we all so I think Will Anderson, Anthony Richardson, um, I think has potential to be better than Cam Newton. However, I think Cam Newton at this stage was more NFL ready than Anthony Richardson. But I think Richardson has greater potential. So we'll see what happens there. I think both agree Colts for sure. We'll be getting Anthony Richardson. It's just a matter of do they trade up at 3 to get him or do they stay at 4? Um,
Yeah.
and Will Levis too, like you mentioned. I've heard a lot of Will Levis for the Colts as well. So, but anyway, so moving on to the next pick here. So this is pick number 4 for me now. I have the Cardinals here, and I have them going Will Anderson. Again,
Wow.
that's right. Shocking. So we have different draft positions, but same team, same players so far. I think it's very. I feel very confident that assuming Arizona doesn't trade out of the top 4, I think the top 4 is probably what we picked. Maybe with Levis instead of Richardson. Um, if Cardinals trade out of 4, probably aren't going to be able to get Will Anderson. Depending on how far down they trade,
Mhm.
probably won't be there. But we'll have to see. Again, I don't. You talked all the great things of Anderson. Phenomenal prospect, phenomenal player. He got DeMarcus Ware comps was kind of his NFL player comp, and
Yeah.
uh, and if you're getting compared to D Ware, definitely have done something right in your collegiate career for sure. So moving on to pick number 5, this is the Seattle Seahawks. This is an interesting one. I think Seattle could potentially go a couple different routes here. I guess I'll just start it here. Personally, I think if Jalen Carter is on the board at 5, I think Seattle's got to get him. I think Seattle's got to get Jalen Carter at 5.
I After the first pick, we were going 5 for 5.
Okay, so you also went Jalen Carter at 5.
But yeah.
Yeah, I just think I've seen someone throw out the potential of getting a quarterback. I don't disagree with that. I think with what Geno Smith did last year, just gave him the contract. They definitely aren't getting a quarterback because you think he's going to start next year. If anything, you would be getting a guy, okay, you're going to sit, a year or two. And then on that end, not going to hoot and holler about Drew Lock, but Drew Lock is a competent, backup. So then, so I don't know if they would do that. But I think if Jalen Carter is there at 5, Seattle's in a great position because I think they have a lot of great pieces everywhere.
Yeah.
They have the luxury of being able to get best player available. And I don't think Pete Carroll is scared of drafting Jalen Carter. Obviously, we all know the kind of recent history of Jalen Carter. Obviously, with that whole situation there. Yep, do not need to dive into that anymore. But I think Pete Carroll goes Jalen Carter at 5, and you also think the same.
Yeah. I mean, 6'3", 314, 18 and a half tackles for loss in the past 3 years. Um, Dude's just a game wrecker. He also, this one surprised me a little bit. I mean, he's got 4 pass deflections, 3 of them just last year.
Okay.
So he's getting up there. And so he actually had, in the past 3 years, he has as many pass deflections as Will Anderson does.
Oh,
So, I mean, anyone who watched any part of that back-to-back national championship run knows what Jalen Carter means to this Georgia defense. Um, just a space eater they can get between the interior of the offensive line and cause problems. Causing problems is a common theme for him. I did not mean that when I originally said that, but sometimes that's how the cookie crumbles.
we know you had the best of intentions.
uh, yeah, if you're Seattle, you have the luxury of adding a much better defensive lineman than the one they got in the Russell Wilson trade. A guy you're familiar with, Shelby Harris.
Yep. Yep.
Now you add Jalen Carter to that because I believe this was supposed to be the Broncos pick.
Yep.
Yep. the one of the worst trades in history if you're a Broncos fan, one of the best if you're a Seahawks fan. Watch out. But like you said, potentially quarterback here. I think if Anthony Richardson falls here, so if the Colts take Will Levis, I think if you're Seattle, you 100% scoop up Anthony Richardson right there.
Okay.
Not Levis, but if Richardson is there, why
So
not?
you think if Richardson is there, Seattle does go quarterback potentially?
I think so. I think Richardson, um, just that combination of Richardson and DK Metcalf, like
Mm.
that. I mean, yeah, that's good. But
And
I
having
think
Pete Carroll your first head coach too, you can't get a whole lot better than that.
yes,
Gotcha. Now I gotta ask you this: do you think if the legal troubles that Jalen Carter has came with recently, and obviously Jalen that all came out right around the combine. Jalen Carter then did not have a great combine, and then had a pro day, and not all that well at the pro day either. Um, do you think if all that stuff does not happen, do you think Bears hold on to one? Do you think then Panthers have one that they go? Do you think Jalen Carter goes top three, or you think it's quarterback or bust?
I could see the Cardinals taking him at 3, but I
Okay,
don't seem like the Panthers or the Texans that need a quarterback spending a pick on a defensive tackle, no matter
I would
how good
agree.
the tackle is. But the Cardinals, they would have a very serious debate there between Will Anderson and Jalen Carter. I think the legal issues, and I'm not too worried about how he showed up at his pro day and the
Okay.
combine. I think that is a direct result of being stressed out from that
Yep,
situation.
could very well be.
Uh, you just turn on the tape. If anyone asks, like, what's up with that? Turn on the tape. It's this dude's nuts. He's going to be, if he's there at 5, Seattle is very happy. Now, if the
Mhm.
legal issues come back to bite them, then they're not. But if everything works out, the Seahawks kind of got themselves a steal at the number 5 pick, which they got in a steal of a trade. So Seattle should be very happy if they can get Jalen Carter there.
Yeah, what a great, I mean, Seattle, that's great for them. Great for them. So now at pick number 6 here, we have the Detroit Lions. Again, a team that could probably do a few things. I don't know if there's a massive hole that they need. Um, they could probably do a few different things here. So I'll let you take Detroit at 6. What do you have them going with?
Well, they just traded away Jeff Okuda, and they didn't really add. I mean, they added some depth at corner, but they, especially in a division where you have Justin Jefferson, DJ Moore, and Christian Watson, um, you need a corner who can lock somebody down. And I think they go with Christian Gonzalez, the 6'1", 197-pound corner out of Oregon. He has a next gen score of a 92 overall, so he is,
Mm,
according to the next gen stats, he is the number 1 overall cornerback in this draft. He also ran a 4.38 so he can hang with pretty much any receiver. Uh, he spent some time at Colorado and Oregon. Um, Solid tackler. He has 128 tackles in the past 3 years. And then he had 4 interceptions this past year. Uh, yeah, I think you get Christian Gonzalez in that defense so they can start building. Um, they took Aiden Hutchinson last year. So if Will Anderson does fall there, you snag him immediately. If
yep,
Jalen Carter there, you snag him immediately.
yep.
But if both those are off the board, I think you go with the best corner available. And I think ultimately that's between Christian Gonzalez and Devin Witherspoon from Illinois. But I think Christian Gonzalez is the pick there.
While we're 6 for 6, Caleb, I also have Detroit going with Christian Gonzalez here at 6. For all the same reasons you said, they traded Jeff Okuda. That pick didn't work out, unfortunately, for him. He had a lot of hype coming out, had some injury issues. Again, it's always tough to see that for sure. But again, undoubtedly the number one best corner in this draft. Everyone's going to agree with that. Another interesting stat, too, kind of a weapon on the special teams unit. He blocked a kick in 12 starts. In 12 starts. So, um, on those field goals, those seems like Detroit a lot of times loses on a heartbreaker last second field goal. Put him out there on that. See if he can block a kick for you too. Obviously, very solid at that. Um, Phenomenal athlete, but he also knows how to play the position. A lot of times we talk about people are great athletes, need some work on their position. He is both, and that's why he's the number one corner coming here. Um, I think this will be a great pickup for Detroit, but I 100% agree with everything that you said. If Will Anderson or Jalen Carter are there at 6, got to take one of them. Got to take one of them for sure. I don't think that'll happen, which is why, well, get the best corner out there. You're in a tough division. Go with Christian Gonzalez. So um, we'll see what happens there. But I like that move for Detroit. So now at pick number 7, we have the Las Vegas Raiders. This is again another interesting one. I've seen a lot of mock drafts where Raiders trade up to that Cardinals spot at 3 and go a quarterback. I get Jimmy G health wise has not been the most reliable of quarterbacks out there. But I think
So you
I
got
think
Jared.
right, yeah, who he played all right in the time he got to play last year, did not play bad. Um, so I think if you get a quarterback, you gotta kind of be content with him not playing right away. Because you invested that contract and stuff into Jimmy. It's just unfortunate how it goes. It shouldn't have to be that way, but it's business. You gotta play the guy who has the money, which you kind of get hamstring a lot of times with that. But so Raiders at 7. What do you have them doing here?
So I thought about going Will Levis here because you could let him sit for a little bit. But looking at next year's quarterback class, there's going to be someone better than Will Levis wherever they're drafting in the first next year. So I have them protecting the guy that they have right now, going with Paris Johnson Jr., the 6'5", 330-pound offensive tackle out of Ohio State. He was a consensus All-American this year. This dude will do everything that he can to give Jimmy Garoppolo time to chuck the ball down to Devontae Adams, and no more Darren Waller, but you can add some weapons at wide receiver later in the draft. I think this is a little too early to be taking a wide receiver. So I think you go ahead and start building up that offensive line for whoever Jimmy G is a bridge to.
7 for 7. I also have Paris Johnson going to the Raiders. Again, knowing Jimmy G's injury past, I think you definitely have to invest in offensive line play here. I think that definitely is a smart move. It's never is the sexy pick. Offensive line is never the sexy pick, but oftentimes it is the smart and the right pick to make. And I think if you're the Raiders, would I be mad if they went for an offensive guy? No, because that could make sense. But I think you win and lose games in the trenches. And if the offensive line isn't good, you really gotta hope Jimmy G stays healthy and is able to put the team on his back. So Paris Johnson, I think, is the guy here for him. Very solid man blocker. I think there's still a little bit of work that can be done with him. But he is very athletic and he's very versatile on the offensive line too, which is very nice. You can plug him in a few different spots and he should be able to do well. There might be some bumps, some learning curves right away. But I think, again, invest in the offensive line. I think this is probably the guy to go with here at this pick in Paris Johnson. So 7 for 7. Will we go 8 for 8, Caleb? Who do you have the Atlanta Falcons going with here at 8?
So I was about to use this adjective, and then I realized it gets overused. But then I thought about it some more, and Will Levis really is the definition of a sneaky athlete.
Okay.
Thinks of his arm, which is somewhat inaccurate. Will have plays where he just misses a receiver. But his passer rating has gone up every single year. So he's shown improvement. His yards per attempt have gone up every single year. Completion percentage the past 2 years has stayed right around that 65.5% mark. Last year, 2021, he ran the ball 107 times for 376 yards, 9 touchdowns. This past year, he didn't run the ball as much. He only had 2 rushing touchdowns. And since sack yardage is taken against a quarterback's rushing totals, it looks like I didn't get to watch as much of Will Levis as I would have liked, but the stats would tell me that he is focusing more on his game as a passer, ran the ball a lot less, which ultimately for his longevity is a good thing. But he still grades out with a next-gen athletic score of 84. And he's 6'4", 229. So kind of that prototypical size that you're looking for in a quarterback, someone who can see over his offensive line. He also was an academic All-American this past year. And so if he can learn off the field, and he's shown, like, statistically, he's shown that he's learning on the field. There's still some things that need to be cleaned up. So I think he goes to Atlanta there at number 8. Desmond Ridder should be able to provide some competition for him. I wouldn't be surprised if Desmond Ridder starts this year, and then we eventually see Will Levis come out there in Atlanta. But that combination there with Marcus Mariota, I believe, gone now, that combination there should give Atlanta some competition there and someone competent to hopefully emerge to throw the ball to Drake London and Kyle Pitts down there in Atlanta.
Yep. This is a tough one. I think the Falcons could go one of 3 different ways on this. I could see them going quarterback. I could see them potentially investing some more into another offensive weapon. I could see them doing something on the defensive line. I could see them doing any one of those 3 things. Unfortunately, Caleb, this is where our perfect score comes to an end because I do not have the Falcons going with Will Levis. I think they stick with Desmond Ridder. I think you draft him, see what happens, give him a full year. Maybe he wows you. I don't think Ridder or Will Levis is necessarily going to be the reason why Atlanta Falcons pick out of the top 10. I don't think either of them are that level to where they will. So the way I look at it, keep Desmond Ridder, see what you got. If he sucks really bad, then maybe you try and get a quarterback next year, and do that. So I have them going with Tyree Wilson, edge rusher out of Texas Tech. This guy is an absolute beast. He only played 10 games this year because he had a foot injury that ended his season. And in the 10 games, he had 14 tackles for loss and 7 sacks amongst his 61 total tackles in 10 starts. Second team All-American, first team All-Conference. He was given a next-gen stat of 89. So I think if this guy had played a full season, I think we're probably talking him up there with the Will Andersons and Jalen Carters, maybe. I don't think I would put him above those 2 by any means. I think he's Anderson. I think Carter's the first guy. I think Anderson's 2, and then I think I'd be pretty content as far as non-cornerbacks go. That Tyree Wilson is probably the 3rd guy there. But if he doesn't get hurt, I think the gap's a lot closer. I think there's a decently sized gap right between those 3 guys. But Falcons, they've made a couple moves this offseason, obviously trading for Jeff Okudah. They brought in Jesse Bates III from Cincinnati to shore up the secondary a little bit as well, too. And And I think get a guy on the defensive line that can get to the quarterback. If the defense plays well and they finally are investing, Atlanta has that's been a massive thing for Atlanta. They have always been a team that can score points, but they are not a team that can ever stop anyone. And finally, they've kind of started to invest in the defense, and we'll have to see how it goes next year. So I think they go with Tyree Wilson here at 8 for Atlanta. So we'll see
Solid.
what happens. We'll see what happens. Moving to the 9th pick in the draft, we have the Chicago Bears, the what should have been number 1 overall pick. Obviously trading back with Carolina, as we mentioned before, to 9. I could see them going wide receiver, get another wide receiver threat there. Certainly couldn't go wrong with that. I could see them maybe going a defensive player. But I think, again, they need to go offensive line. I think would be the smart way to go. And I think they go with the dude out of Northwestern, Pete Skronsky. I think as far as offensive lineman goes, from what I've read, he's probably the most NFL ready offensive lineman out of all of them. Obviously, being a Big Ten guy yourself, you probably know a lot more about him than I do. But I think Bears going offensive line, safe pick, and I think it could be a really solid one.
I think that's fair. And I don't see them going after a wide receiver that early just because you already have Chase Claypool. You just got DJ Moore. You still have Darnell Mooney. I don't think wide receiver is a pressing need. I also thought about going with Skoronsky there, keeping him in Chicago. But I went a little outside of Chicago and took the cornerback out of Champaign, Devon Witherspoon, 5'11 and a half, 180-pound corner. He was a consensus All-American in 2022. This dude was locked down. He is going to be up there with Christian Gonzalez when it comes to which corner is the top corner. And I think he's a pretty solid consolation for the Bears there. You keep an Illinois guy in Illinois or University of Illinois. I don't remember where he played his high school ball. Probably Miami or something. But yeah, you keep the Illini in Illinois, plays for the Bears. I think they need corners bad in that division, which has some really good receivers, as mentioned earlier, except now that it's the Lions you're talking about, not the Bears having to guard against. Well, now you've got Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jamison Williams, and they just brought back Marvin Jones. So you got to add some corners if you want to be able to stop anyone in this NFC North.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Again, not a really bad pick. I toyed with Detroit going with Witherspoon at 6.
Mhm.
I think Christian Gonzalez is the best corner of the two. I think Witherspoon, though, the only reason I thought him is because I could see him being more of a Dan Campbell guy, just a
Mhm.
kind of a big hitter, physical dude, not afraid of contact. Not to say Christian Williams isn't. You have to be able to have some contact playing corner, but I think he's more of the Dan Campbell guy. So I think they should go Christian Gonzalez. If they went Devin Witherspoon for Detroit at 6, I would not be shocked by that. Really, really solid player for sure.
Yeah, Brett
Absolutely.
Bielema and Dan Campbell seem to have similar tastes when it comes to defense.
Right. Right. Yes. Very much so. Very much so. So now Philadelphia Eagles at 10. Well, we know this much. If Jalen Carter is there at 10, which if he drops that far, I would be thoroughly shocked.
Taking him at 9 if he's at 9.
Yep, exactly. But if he is there at 10, Eagles definitely go Jalen Carter. I'd be willing to bet the house on it. But we both don't think he will be there, nor should a lot of other people think he will be there at 10. So I think they go with another defensive guy. I thought potentially, I think there's one running back that for sure will get picked in the first round. You can make an argument for another one. I think there's one for sure, and we'll obviously get to who that is at some point here in the first round for one of us, I'm sure.
We can talk about Ibrahim a little later.
What's that?
We can talk about Mo Ibrahim a little bit later.
Oh, this is my mock draft 2.0. I have Ibrahim going number 1 overall, actually.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Yep. But this is my mock draft 1, so we're just going to talk about this one. But so I do not have Eagles, however, going running back. I have them going defense and getting Myles Murphy out of Clemson. Solid player, Clemson. They've had some pretty decent defensive players come out of here the last few years for sure. In 13 games in 2020, let's see, 2022. 2022, 13 games, 11 starts. He tied the team lead with 6.5 sacks, 11 lost tackles, 2 pass breakups. And Miles is Murphy's dad. Willard played football at Chattanooga. Not that that really means anything to anyone, but football is in the blood for him. Again, I think he probably isn't the sexiest of the defensive players. Has a very high motor. Is always going to give 110% for sure. But he's not he's not really an explosive player. You're not going to see him fly off the line and get to the quarterback really quick. So I think he's going to have to develop the moves, the skill set to maybe be a little more crafty to get around guys, to maybe beef up those numbers a little bit. But I think playing on a team where a defensive line mate and Fletcher Cox is there, what better guy to learn from than him? There is not many out there for sure. So I think that would be great if Myles Murphy went to Eagles at 10. So what do you have the NFC champion Philadelphia Eagles going with here?
Well, as you briefly alluded to earlier, running back is definitely in the mix here. And I have them going with the 5'11", 250-pound running back out of Texas, being Bijan Robinson.
Okay.
He's a 6 overall next-gen score. He ran a 4.46 40, unanimous All-American. Broke 1,000 yards each of the past 2 seasons with about 300 yards receiving each of those years. 20 total touchdowns this past year, 15 the year before. He bounces off tackles pretty well. He can run the ball well, decent as a pass catcher. Averages 13 yards per reception. So not bad out of the and Philadelphia really is sitting there with the luxury of not needing a quarterback because you just locked up Jalen Hurts long term.
Yep.
Not needing a receiver because you just stole A.J. Brown from the Titans last year.
Ugh, what a trade.
They have probably the best offensive line in the NFL.
Yep.
Defense is starting to age in a couple spots. So I could see them going defensive line, but corner's still solid. So if you got the luxury to take the best running back in this draft, and I've seen possibly the best running back since Saquon Barkley.
Okay.
For the draft, why not just take a luxury pick there in Bijan Robinson? You're the defending champs. You just lost Miles Sanders to the Panthers. Do they really trust Kenneth Gainwell to be the number 1 running back? I don't think so. I think running back is the only spot where it's a major hole. Granted, running back can be filled by a 6th rounder these days, but if you can take a guy like Bijan here, take Bijan.
Yeah. And I don't disagree with that thought process at all. I think Philadelphia is really solid at a lot of positions. Obviously, losing Sanders, like you mentioned, to the Panthers, there definitely is a hole there. Now, when Gainwell played last year, Gainwell did really well. So if they don't go running back here, they say we're going with Gainwell. He did enough last year to where you could say, okay, let's see how it goes. And another interesting thing, though, running backs, the big thing right now is don't get a running back in the first round because you're going to have them for 4 years, if that, and then you're probably moving on to someone else. It's not worth it. You can plug and play. And I agree with that most of the time. Most of the time. But every once in a while, a guy comes around where you got to get him if he's there. And I think Bijan Robinson is 1,000% could be this guy at 10 for for Philadelphia. 13 yards of reception. That's good. Forget a running back. That's good for any position. Wide receiver, tight end. And this guy's coming out of the backfield and doing that. And so I think because of what he can add on the pass catching side of things, that would not be a bad pick at all. And I would not be shocked if he goes 10th overall here to the Eagles. So moving to pick number 11, we have the Tennessee Titans. Yeah, this is an interesting one for me. I certainly think they could go a potential Will Levis here if he is at 11. Again, I'm not a massive Will Levis guy. I think they still try and ride it out with Tannehill. But at 11, what do you have Tennessee going with?
I have them going with, I've already got Levis off my board. So the top 4 quarterbacks are gone. And I don't see Hendon Hooker going this high after tearing his ACL. Sounds like he should be ready to play early on this coming season. So that shouldn't hold teams back too much. And prior to his ACL tear, he was probably locked in at number 3 for quarterbacks. Potentially, like at that point, he could have surpassed Stroud or Young. So I could see them considering it maybe, but I think who's gonna, like, they have a good line, but they need to get another piece. So I think right here, you look forward to next year. You still have Ryan Tannehill under contract. Go ahead and get a guy that you can plug in and play right away on the offense. And that's Peter Skoronski. He could play offensive tackle or he could kick inside to guard. A lot of projections I've seen have him moving inside to guard just because he does have shorter arms. He has a 32.25-inch arm span. Not arm span, 32.25-inch arms. Yeah, that sounds right. Length for arm. Yeah.
Yep.
32.25 would be really small for just wingspan.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
NBA mate. But he's 6'4", 313, unanimous All-American. This dude can protect the quarterback, and might as well just set yourself up for next year and start rebuilding that offensive line a little bit.
Now, do you see Tennessee trading up? So now we were kind of briefly mentioning this earlier.
Yeah.
We'd get to that. Do you think Tennessee potentially moves up into the top 3? Probably, and the top 3, I mean number 3 with Arizona, and trading and trading something there if Arizona likes the deal enough. Do you see that as a thing?
If the price is right, why not go up and get Anthony Richardson? I don't think you trade up for Will Levis.
I agree.
But Richardson, maybe. I could see that.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's obviously very intriguing, and no one knows what'll happen, but I think, and that's why I think it's the Colts. Like, do you want a division rival to leapfrog you and get that guy? And I think it's interesting, very interesting. But I have Titans staying here at 11. I agree. I think, again, maybe they go Levis here for myself, if Levis is there. I think they go corner. And I don't really have any strong reasons for that. I know obviously the last few years they've had some pretty decent defenders, but also guys that have been older now, guys that are now left. And Tennessee's kind of in a weird spot because this team had Super Bowl intentions for a few year stretch. They had Super Bowl intentions. If a Cincinnati or a Kansas City isn't in the same conference of them, we may have already talked about Tennessee playing in a Super Bowl potentially. Who knows? Um, obviously, I think they're pretty content um, with kind of rebuilding, and we saw that last year with AJ Brown getting traded on draft day to Philadelphia. That kind of told us, okay, Tennessee probably not in the market to be winning ball games right now,
Yeah.
which is unfortunate because I think they still had a little juice left in the tank. I think they still have a little juice left. Give it one more ride and see what could happen there. But yeah, 11's a tough spot to be in. So I think they go with Devin Witherspoon here, the corner from Illinois. And you were right, Caleb. He is from Florida, went from Pensacola, Florida. So so good job on that. You did a great job of breaking him down, and we've kind of talked about him a little bit as well too. A guy that's not afraid of contact as well. Um, he was named the Big Ten Defensive Back of the Year. 17 pass defenses, 3 picks, 41 tackles in 12 starts, 2.5 for loss as well too. So we'll see what happens with it. But I think Titans, if they don't trade up, don't get Levis, probably are doing something then on the defense, and they go Witherspoon. So now, 12th overall pick. This is the Houston Texans. So Houston has another first round pick. I actually have a trade happening here. I have
Wow.
I have the Green Bay Packers trading up to this spot to get a wide receiver. Now, yes, I understand how comical it would be after these last few years when Rodgers has been very vocal about wanting and needing help, them pretty much saying, I don't care, I'm not giving it to you, and then requests a trade. I think they have to go wide receiver. Because right now, your number one is Christian Watson, probably.
Yeah.
Romeo Dobbs is your probably number two. I think
My
you
there,
undoubtedly. What's that?
my hesitation there is I don't know. Like, are you having them trade up that number 13 pick from the Jets that the Packers would get to move up there? Because that's going to be a tricky situation. And in the draft's next week, we have to see Aaron Rodgers get moved like soon so that the Packers have that capital freed up to move up.
Right. And
I think
I
for draft night, but will you have enough time to negotiate a second trade there?
right. And I'll be honest, I kind of mentioned you, but before I forgot that Aaron Rodgers thing was a whole thing, and I was just kind of blindly going through prospects. So I think it's probably likely that that trade with Houston doesn't happen.
Mhm.
I think it is more likely that um, you know the Rodgers trade happens, and they probably move up to um, that that 13 spot with the Jets and do that. I think that's the more logical way. And they're going to probably have their still shot at the best wide receiver out there on the market right now at that position at 13. Um, but I also forgot with the Router thing, but also I think part of it was because I kind of just wanted to do if they didn't do the Rodgers thing prospects wise, what could make sense. So that's
Yeah.
why I have them trading up here to 12 with Houston, um, and going with Jackson Smith and Jigba at wide receiver, assuming Aaron Rodgers is not the quarterback this next season. Jordan Love is going to need some guys to throw to, and he can develop with Christian Watson. He can develop with Romeo Dobbs, but if you throw Jackson Smith and Jigba, to that you potentially don't need Jordan Love to be as good versus if you didn't get him. Then you're asking him to do probably a lot more. And who knows? Like, Jordan Love could be a decent player. You don't know that. My betting side would bet probably against that. But to be fair, we really haven't seen him play it much on NFL. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But yeah, I have Jack Smith and Jigba going here. But assuming the Aaron Rodgers trade happens before the NFL draft or on the NFL draft, then no, I don't think the Packers will trade up to 12 because I think they will have done that at 13 with the Jets. So 12 here. What do you have going on here with Houston?
Well, I have Houston staying put and drafting Jackson Smith and Jigba.
Okay. Yeah.
He his 40 time. Some people said it raised red flags, but we saw the tape. He doesn't have burn you speed. He plays fast. And that's where I think the 40 is one of the more overrated measurements at the combine. I think the one that does matter is he was the wide receiver number 1 in the 3-cone drill when he ran a 6.57 3-cone drill. So that is more indicative of like what can he do in like tight spaces, that explosiveness, which is really what you need from a receiver. Game tape somewhat limited because he really only has had that one healthy season in 2021 when he was the Big Ten wide receiver of the year. Caught 95 passes for 1,600 yards, 9 touchdowns. Dude was a beast. And I think this pick right here would be great for Houston because you're pairing him with his college quarterback, CJ Stroud. I think that does more for CJ Stroud than it does for Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think Smith and Jigba will be able to thrive wherever he goes. I think CJ Stroud, because he is being taken earlier in the draft, he's going to be on a roster with more holes. You need that familiar receiver. I think that would be a wonderful pairing there in Houston and something to really start to build that offense around with John Mechie. So,
yep, great point. I was just about to bring that up.
Need to forget Mechie because he was injured. But if you have that duo of Smith and Jigba and Mechie with CJ Stroud throwing the ball around, I think that sets him up for his best chance at success there in Houston.
Yeah, I agree. I agree for sure. I think if Houston hangs on to this pick, don't trade back, and that's again another liberty that you're able to have when you have multiple first round picks. You can trade back and get more draft capital, get more players. So they very well could potentially trade back here in this one. But I think they'll probably stay put, and they just need guys. At that point, when you're picking at 12, Houston's so bad of a team that you just whoever's best player available at that moment, you need to get them. But we both assume Jackson Smith and Jigba will probably be that best player available at that moment. So we'll see what happens there. But so moving on to pick 13, currently is the New York Jets. Probably will end up being the Green Bay Packers, but we will pick as if the New York Jets are picking here at 13. I have them going offensive line. I have them going with Broderick Jones from Georgia is who I have here. It was who I have here for the Jets. 6'5", 311 dog from Georgia. Guy that's fairly athletic for his position. Can move quickly pretty well. And just what's that?
4.9740. Just under 5.
Just under 5 offensive lineman. Can't go wrong with that. Can't go wrong with that. So he needs to improve a little bit of his punch accuracy. Punch accuracy is kind of one of the bigger things that I have seen with him from what people have been saying. But he's very talented in space, very talented in the block game to help spring the running game ahead as well too with that. So but physical dude and could be a solid player here for the Jets and to shore up an offensive line if if Rodgers is there, if Zach Wilson is there, can't go wrong with an offensive line pick. And I think that's what they should do. They've drafted so well, though. Last year, I think Jets may have been the winners of the draft. They drafted so very well. And I think they can shore up on that, getting an offensive lineman. So what do you have the Jets doing here at 13?
So I have the Jets doing the same thing I would have the Packers doing. So regardless of who's picking here at 13, I think it's going to be the same pick. And I think it's the same guy that you just said, Broderick Jones. You're either pairing him with Mekhi Becton in New York or you're kind of starting to replace a very injured David Bakhtiari. I can't remember the last time he was healthy for a full season. You got to protect either Zach Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love, whoever the quarterback is. You got to protect him. So
Yep.
I think Broderick Jones at number 13, whether that's New York or Green Bay, I think Broderick Jones is the pick there.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Um, Again, solid pick. Shoring up the offensive line. Obviously, championship experience being kind of one of the main dudes on that offensive line for Georgia the last couple of years. Solid guy. So, moving on to pick number 14, we have the New England Patriots picking here at 14. I think they absolutely need to go offensive threat. This is something that we have talked about with the New England Patriots for the last how many years now. Go and get a solid player on the offense that can make you be not so inept on offense. And
Tebow.
what's that?
Tim Tebow.
He was a Patriot for a moment in time. That is a thing. That is a thing for sure. Um, However, I have them going wide receiver if they go the smart route. And I have them going with Jordan Addison from USC. I think after Jackson Smith and Jigba, there's a few other guys. I'm pretty confident in Addison kind of maybe being the second wide receiver off the board in this year's draft here in the first round. Kind of one of the common themes is that I've seen from a lot of these receivers is there isn't really the big bruising receiver that's going to get picked in the first round. It's a lot of kind of 5'10, 5'11, 6-foot guys, but guys that are very intentional with their foot movements, very calculated with their foot movements. And, they may not have the combine stats that are going to jump off the board at you. Very, very solid receivers. And this guy's right up there with next gen stat of 82 here. Also, this guy extremely solid on the punt return game too, as well with that. So again, a guy that you can plug in on the special teams unit um, for the New England Patriots, and we know how much Bill loves his special team guys. So this could be an instant threat on their form as well too. So what do you have Patriots going with at 14?
So I have a guy who slid down my board a little bit. I think he's every bit worth a top 10 pick. I could have seen the Bears taking him. I could have seen the Eagles taking him, maybe even the Titans. But that's Tyree Wilson, who you mentioned earlier. 6'6", 271 pounds, first team All American in 2022, despite playing only 10 games. Yeah, everything you said, Tyree Wilson. You had someone there with Matthew Judon. You can never have enough pass rushers in this league. So I
Very
think
true.
Tyree a great pick for the Patriots there.
So you don't think they go offensive threat here?
I could see them going Addison or maybe even Quentin Johnston. I toyed with the idea of both of those. I think there's enough depth at wide receiver in this draft that if you miss out on one of those top 5 guys, guys 6 through 9, or maybe 6 through 10, I don't have my big board in front of me, but those guys that are that next tier aren't that far behind, that you can go ahead and wait a little bit to take a wide receiver, unless you're 100% sold on a guy like Jordan Addison or maybe Quentin Johnston.
Gotcha. Yeah, we'll see what happens there with New England. Obviously, Bill likes to not necessarily always go with the obvious route of choice and likes to change it up a little bit.
Who's
Um,
the quarterback for University of Tennessee, Chattanooga? That might be a guy to watch there.
that's potential. That's potential.
Maybe the kicker for Lenoir Ryan or something.
Why not? Bring him in. Bring him in. So moving on now to pick 15. This is where currently the Packers are slated to pick. Again, probably won't end up picking here.
Give up the 15th pick in the Rodgers trade, though.
Well, this was in my draft that I had because I had them going with the Texans. So I had them
Oh,
swapping positions.
oh, yes.
They right, yep. So they in real life are probably keeping 15 um in the Aaron Rodgers trade with that. Or maybe the Jets fleece them and they get 15 as well as Rodgers too. That would certainly be something. But so I have the Texans picking here, and you mentioned Texans getting an offensive threat, Jackson Smith and Jigba, number one wide receiver. I have them going with a number one tight end in this draft, and Dalton Kincaid out of Utah. He's definitely the number one dude. Now, a
Arguably.
player, yeah, sure, and a player comp that has been tossed around. Nobody is saying he is him, but there are similar traits that
You're like NFL.com draft profile, aren't you?
no, I've this is many different places I have seen this.
Okay.
That Travis Kelsey, some shades of Travis Kelsey
Okay. I
in
saw
him.
Gronk on NFL.com, I believe.
Okay, gotcha. The one that I am looking at NFL.com, I'm seeing Zach Ertz is his comp
Oh,
for him. So, but I've heard the name Travis Kelsey kind of tossed around a little bit with this guy. Um, very shifty. He has a he has a ranking next gen stat of 88, um, which is obviously pretty solid coming out there. But again, coming out of Utah, this guy was a pretty solid piece there in the Utah offense. That may I add did lose to my Florida Gators week one of the season, but
way to win.
neither here. What's that?
Way to win your Super Bowl. How'd your bowl game go?
Neither here nor there. Moving on. Would not like to talk about that at this current moment. Terrible. But I'll answer your question. Awful. Embarrassing performance. Um, Pretty solid guy here. So I think Houston gets an offensive dude to help out Bryce Young. And I think this is the one that they potentially go with. If what won't happen happens, then we'll go here. But so at 15, you obviously would have Green Bay picking here. Who do you have the Packers getting here?
Yeah, so I forgot you mentioned earlier as well, Miles Murphy, adding to their pass rush there, 6'5", 268, first team All ACC player. Miles Murphy, I mean, you mentioned everything already, I believe. He would fit right in on that defense, be a day one starter. Um, the Packers they need a quarterback, but they have a quarterback. Um,
Yeah.
I think why not take Miles Murphy there? You may have heard my phone just ding. I have to run and grab my charger real quick. We're at 10%.
Yep. Go and
So
do that.
with Miles Murphy to the Packers, I will be right back for the back half of the draft.
Yes, absolutely. I'll stall a little bit here for you. Again, that's not a bad pick for the Packers. Staying here at 15. I really think that offense should be a route that they go, but the number two, I think a big thing that we have seen from the Packers of why they have had maybe some of their playoff struggles in the past has been the defense. The defense has not been really solid. They've given up a lot of yards, can't tackle dudes, especially people in the middle of the field. So I think, if the Packers do add a guy on defense, I think if he is there at 15, that is certainly not a bad pick by any means at all for the Green Bay Packers there. So we'll see what happens. Again, like we mentioned before, we certainly assume Aaron Rodgers gets traded either on draft day, before draft day, um, and we'll see how the picks shuffle around. But again, Packers are not going to be trading the 15th overall pick as well as Aaron Rodgers to the Jets. So, but certainly crazier things have happened. They traded up to get Jordan Love. So maybe, maybe. Um, So we'll move on here to pick number 16 here, the Washington Commanders. This is an interesting one. I don't know. I don't know what the Commanders go with here. I toyed with the idea of quarterback, but from what I've heard, they're probably pretty confident at throwing Sam Howell out there and seeing what happens with him. I know Taylor Heineke has mentioned a lot of great things about him. They were obviously both teammates there last year. Um, Now, again, no one's saying Taylor Heineke's word is, you know, the word of Tom Brady by any means, but teammates, you see how a guy works, see what he does behind the scenes that neither of us can see, and obviously could be a guy. So I shifted away from that. They have decent offensive threats. Obviously, Scary Terry McLaurin is a decent dude. Pretty solid defensive line if everyone's healthy. Arguably, maybe the best in football defensive line with everyone coming out there. But I have them going with the cornerback position. I have them going with Cam Smith, corner out of South Carolina. Again, this one was a tough one for me just because I don't know what the Commanders should do. I don't know if there really is necessarily yeah, you absolutely have to go a certain guy here. Maybe maybe they do running back here and go Bijan Robinson if he's there at 16. I could potentially see that, but I had them going with Cam Smith. Um, Played 3 years at Meade High School in Maryland before going to the Gamecocks and playing on that team. Um, he started 9 of 11 games in 2022, 27 tackles, 1 loss, 1 pick, 5 breakups, and missed a little bit of time due to a concussion. Um, Very instinctual player. He's able to track down the ball well, and knows what he's doing out there. The acceleration is definitely something that struggles with a little bit. Something that I've read with it, maybe keeping up with guys a little, but a solid, cornerback two maybe that you can toss out there. So I have them going with Cam Smith. What do you have Washington going with at 16?
So I also have them going corner. But I got someone who doesn't really have much of a problem keeping up with guys. He ran a 4.46 40, 6 foot 2.5 inches tall, weighs in at 193. First team All Big Ten corner, Joey Porter Jr. He's got that NFL pedigree with his dad, Joey Porter, played in the NFL. Sure you're familiar with him.
I've heard the name once or twice.
uh, the comparison I heard thrown out when I was doing a little bit more film watching on him today, obviously saw a decent amount of him with him being in the Big Ten. But Trevon Diggs,
Mm,
a bit of a gambler,
okay.
doesn't have anywhere near the interception. I mean, I'm sitting here looking at one career interception. But he has the speed to make up for he is an aggressive corner. He had 11 pass breakups last year. He had 27 tackles, 50 the year before. He's got some length to him at 6 foot 2.5 inches. Like, that's not a small corner. And to be running a 4.46 with that kind of a frame, I think that's the kind of thing that Washington needs right now in that defense. As much as I would love to see Benjamin St-Juste break out and be the number one corner, I think you need to add another guy in Joey Porter Jr.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Now, for my next pick here, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, maybe the only what's that?
Oh, I was just laughing because I think I know which direction you're about to go.
And kind of the reason maybe why I did not have Washington go Joey Porter Jr. at 16 is because storyline, I think it would be pretty dang cool if Joey Porter Jr. got drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers. Obviously, you mentioned his dad. What's that?
And then he goes to your Dolphins after like 5 years.
I mean, sure, sign me up, sign me up. But
Jalen Ramsey will be
obviously,
retired by then.
potentially, maybe Xavier Howard. Who knows? Who knows? Um, but I have him going to Pittsburgh. Obviously, his dad being a Pittsburgh Steeler as well there for a little bit in time. Um, but I think it's fair to say, I think as far as cornerbacks go, we're definitely both in agreement. Christian Gonzalez is the number one corner. I think he has a pretty high ceiling. I think he's maybe a little more of a project corner, and I don't know, scoff at myself a little bit by using that term with him because he already is going to have the NFL pedigree with his dad having success, not just playing, but actually being a pretty, decent player in the NFL as well too. Um, but the flashes, you kind of mentioned the Trayvon Diggs, the kind of home run or you're getting burnt type of guy.
Yep.
Um, I think he has potential to be greater than that. So we'll see what happens. But um, I have Pittsburgh going with Joey Porter Jr. at 17. So who do you have Pittsburgh going with?
I also have them going corner. Also another Big Ten corner. This one even faster. I have them going with Maryland's Deonte Banks. He ran a 4.35 40. He's 6 foot, 197 pounds. He has a next gen athletic score of 98, which is
Mm,
number for all corners. And Anthony Richardson, for how much he's talked about as being such an elite athlete, had a 99. Deonte Banks is right there, like 1 point lower than him in athletic score. And Deonte Banks is also 87 overall next gen score, which would put him at the number 3 corner. So athletically speaking, like Deonte Banks is the best corner athletically. Um, the tape won't show that. He still has some development that needs to be done. Um, but what prospect doesn't have development that needs to be
right.
done with Andrew Luck sitting in this draft class?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, he kind of broke out this past year with 38 tackles, an interception, and 8 pass breakups. I think you slide Deonte Banks right in there. He doesn't have to travel far from Baltimore to Pittsburgh. Gets to travel to Baltimore to play in front of his college fans every year with their division rival, the Ravens. So yeah, I think Deonte Banks there at number 17 if Joey Porter is not on the board, because I think if Joey Porter's sitting there, it's kind of hard to ignore those ties.
Right. That would be very tough. That'd be very tough to do for sure. Um, yeah, I like that. Um, this will not be the last time Deontay Banks' name is mentioned, though. A little sneak peek, so look forward to later on, folks. Look forward to later
Nice.
on.
I would have been
So
disappointed
now,
if you didn't have him in the first round.
what's that?
I would have been disappointed if you didn't have him in the first round.
Well, I may be stupid, but I am not dumb. So now we have the Detroit Lions picking at 18. So this will be the Lions' second first round pick in this draft.
we
Again,
both
having a second round. What's that?
we both had him taking Christian Gonzalez with that first pick.
Yep, both have him taking Christian Gonzalez. I think offensive side of things, um, they're pretty solid. I could see them going tight end potentially. Obviously, them trading Hawkinson to the Minnesota Vikings in their division there. Um, they're obviously in need of a tight end threat, but as far as receivers go, they have dudes, so they do not have guys to not throw to. They're able to get tight end. I can see them going. However, I do not have them going tight end. I have them shoring up, getting another guy on that defense, and a name that I have heard been pronounced a few different times. So you will have to tell me which one it is. Clemson defensive tackle Brian
Yep,
Breeze, Brezzy. I don't know.
Brzee.
Brzee. Okay, so I got him the first try. Perfect. Um,
Not a bad
I have
pick.
Detroit going here. I like the pick because of a potential. Now, this pick kind of reminds me of a couple years ago when the Miami Dolphins picked Jalen Phillips. I think they have similar types of um, backgrounds as far as had a few injuries, situations that kind of took them off the team, talent off the charts. And I think this will be the Jalen Phillips for Detroit. Um, Obviously, super, super sad situation. His younger sister passed away of brain cancer at the age of 15, so he missed a game with that. And then also himself, he missed time due to a kidney infection. So, really, just this year, not a just yeah, personal
True
stuff,
story.
life stuff, really unfortunate stuff happened. So there definitely was a little bit of a setback in his game. Um, I hope teams recognize that and also recognize that he is not what happened this year. He is a very talented player, and I think that could be a great guy to put on Dan Campbell's roster on the defensive line. I think the offense was very, very solid last year, was ranked at the top or towards the top for the majority of the season. And I think getting Christian Gonzalez at 6, getting a guy on the defensive line at 18 or a defensive player would be a fantastic move. Obviously, I got Aiden Hutchinson last year. We all know how that turned out. Fantastic ad for Detroit. So getting a couple more guys here in the first to shore up that defense could really build something really special as next year. So for 18, what do you have Detroit doing here?
So you mentioned Aiden Hutchinson. Um, I have them going with another big white Big Ten defensive end. Um, to bookend that defensive line, I'm going with Lucas Van Ness, the edge rusher out of Iowa, 6'5", 272 pounds, ran a 4.58 40, and was second team All Big Ten this past year, with 13 sacks in the past 2 years combined, 19 tackles for loss, and 70 tackles, both of those stats being the past 2 years. I think great move adding Hutchinson. Now add pressure from the other side. And I think if you have Hutchinson and Van Ness as your two bookend defensive ends, you're doing pretty good. And I think that's the kind of defense Dan Campbell will like there.
Yep. Yep. Definitely both in agreement. I think if Detroit keeps both of their first round picks, you got to go defense for both of them. I could hear the argument, like I mentioned, of them, but it may be going a tight end for that second first round pick. But I
I,
think the smart. What's that?
I think with tight end, I think you hold put. You got an extra second rounder from the Vikings.
Sure.
Uh, Second round
True.
puts you there for guys like Tucker Kraft from South Dakota State and Darnell Washington from Georgia, the 6'7" guy who can hurdle over people.
Yes.
You're not going to get a Kincaid or a Mayer there in the second round, but I think one of those two guys, and there are some other names that aren't coming to mind immediately, but there's going to be some guys there.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. So we'll see what happens there with that. But I definitely agree with that. I think defense probably is a route you need to go here for that. But pick number 19 is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They got Baker Mayfield as their quarterback. I think I need to give my boy Kyle Trask some reps this year. And maybe he will get some legit shots. Who knows? I think there's a very real chance that could happen. Um, so again, I think at this point where they are picking, they're not going to get quarterback because it's pretty much either more than likely for sure Hendon Hooker, maybe Will Levis. At that point,
Did did Will Levis take a woman from you or something?
he has not. He has not. But I do not have
How do you not have him taken yet?
because I don't.
That's
Because I
fair.
don't.
That's fair.
Um, so I have Tampa going offensive line. I know they had some injuries on the offensive line last year. And that wasn't the reason, but it was a reason why Tampa wasn't as successful. So I have them going with Darnell Wright, the offensive tackle out of Tennessee, a guy that um, overall can slide into a few different spots. He is pretty versatile on the line, and especially in this day and age, that's such a huge thing for offensive linemen. If you almost have to be able and be willing to play a different spot on the offensive line, and because there's just a lot of versatility, a lot of guys shifting over. You're rarely, I think, maybe if you are a center and get drafted as a center, that you might are probably going to stay as a center. But if you're drafted as a tackle, as a guard, be willing to shift around a little bit and move because that's just what offensive linemen do these days. Um, so I have them going with him, and he's definitely very versatile into that. So we'll see what happens there. But I have Tampa going Darnell Wright. What do you have Tampa doing here in 19?
So I have Tampa taking a shot here at Nolan Smith, the edge rusher from Georgia. He's undersized at 6'2", 238, but with that smaller frame comes a 4.39 40.
Yeah.
This is a guy who was lining up coming off the edge in the SEC, mind you. So this is going against guys like Darnell Wright. And he got 20 tackles for loss in the past. Well, that's in the past 4 years. 15 in the past 2 years. 7.5 sacks in the past 2 years. Had a pick. Had some pass deflections. Forced 3 fumbles in 2021. I mean, this dude's just making plays all over the field, and that makes sense when you have a defensive end edge rusher who's running a sub 4.4 40. I think that's a great pick there, something to start building around on that defense. You did just have Devin White requested a trade out of there, so you got to start looking at, okay, who are some guys who can kind of fill in that edge rush linebacker position, and Nolan Smith, not a bad pick there.
Massive fan of Nolan Smith. This is a guy that, like you mentioned, probably was a first rounder. I think is pretty confident. But then the combine showed up. Oh my gracious. This dude absolutely killed it at the combine. You mentioned a 4.39 40. I mean, you put that on defense. Oh, it would be very tough to miss on this guy. I think
that's faster than, I believe. Let me pull that up again. 4.39. That's faster than Joey Porter Jr. ran.
Yep.
And Joey Porter Jr. is considered to have decent speed for a corner.
Yep. So I love this pick. If Tampa does end up trading White, phenomenal guy to fill in and fill his role. Probably a more athletic White. But if they keep him and they still go with Nolan, cannot go wrong with that as well either. Then your defense is even that much better. So we'll see what happens there. Pick number 20, we have the Seattle Seahawks. So this is Seattle's, again, another first round pick. Now, this is their actual pick in the Russell Wilson trades where they finished. Obviously, had a miracle year last year. No one's expecting them to do as well as they did. So that's why they're picking 20. Again, I think this could be a home run of a draft for the Seattle Seahawks if they have an opportunity to get Jalen Carter at 5 and then go Jalen Carter at 5. You're able to do a lot of different things here at pick number 20. I could see them trading out of this. I could see that happening for sure. I would not be shocked. But I have them going a receiver because why not? Give another receiving threat for the Seattle Seahawks. Obviously, I already have DK. Tyler Lockett's a dude. But I have them going with Jalen Hyatt, wide receiver out of Tennessee here. This guy, really, really solid player. He led the Vols with 67 catches, which is 5th in the nation. And 600 catches. And then he ranked 5th in the nation with 1,267 receiving yards and 2nd in the FBS with 15 touchdowns in 12 starts. So this was definitely Hendon Hooker's dude when Hendon Hooker was playing and he was getting a lot of love, but he was also getting it done a little bit when Hendon Hooker wasn't playing as well too, which is important and shows that he can work with a lot of different guys. Slender guy, kind of longer body. I think he's an incredible number two. I don't think he's a guy that's ever going to be a number one in an NFL offense, but I think he'll be an extremely solid number two. And again, give Geno Smith another guy to throw to. You have DK, you have Tyler Lockett. Give him Jalen Hyatt, pick number 20. What do you see happening?
Yeah, I've also got them going wide receiver there, except I have them going with Quentin Johnston, the wide receiver from Texas Christian University. 6'3", 208-pound receiver, two-time all-first team Big 12 in the past 2 years. Had 1,000 yards this past year on 60 catches for 6 touchdowns. We saw what he could do in the playoffs. They had that upset in the first round against Michigan. And we also what happened when they played Georgia. Don't get into that, but Georgia is a damn good team. And so was Michigan. And Michigan has some corners who will likely be drafted this year. Not in the first round, but in the mid rounds. They have a couple corners who should be drafted, specifically, I believe, DJ Turner. But Quentin Johnston still had a good showing against Michigan. It was very clear that he was the guy for Max Duggan in that really a dream season for TCU. And I think if you can have Quentin Johnston there with DK Metcalf, the size that those two provide, and especially in contrast to Tyler Lockett, I think you're really setting up Geno Smith and or whoever they take next year or the year after for success.
Right. I agree with that for sure. Not a bad pick by any means for Seattle. So Seattle's going to be a scary team, man. And obviously we saw what they did last year with Geno at the realm. Extremely young team. I don't know how much longer Pete Carroll will coach Seattle. He obviously is very up there in age, but also in great shape. So who knows? The Seattle team is built for the long haul. They are built for the future. So I'll be very excited to see how Seattle competes next 5 to 10 years. Pick number 21, we have the Los Angeles Chargers. What do you have the Chargers doing at 21?
So I have them, and I've toyed around with the idea of them maybe shipping out Keenan Allen to a team that needs a receiver, like a Tennessee. Tennessee needs receiver help after trading away A.J. Brown. I have them taking Jordan Addison, the wide receiver from Southern California, 5'11", 173 pounds, ran a 4.49 40, won the Biletnikoff in 2021. Had a bit of a regression this past year as far as numbers go, but I think that's to be expected when you go from being Kenny Pickett's number one wide receiver, catching 100 passes for almost 1,600 yards and 17 touchdowns, to being one of several very talented receivers at USC. He got 59 passes for 875 yards and 8 touchdowns. So not bad by any means, just a slight step back, which is why he's not that easy number one wide receiver pick there. Plus, he's a little smaller, coming in at just under 6 foot. I think if you add Jordan Addison to that offense with Mike Williams and potentially still Keenan Allen, you're really giving Justin Herbert the tools to succeed in the long run.
Right. Now, obviously, there's been rumors of a potential Austin Eckler situation brewing. So we'll see if he gets shipped at all. That's something to monitor. If he does, if Bijan Robinson there's 21, maybe the Chargers get him.
I could see Jahmyr Gibbs if they ship off Austin Eckler. Jahmyr Gibbs, at least to me, feels like a better fit. He's a better receiver than
Robinson.
Than Bijan Robinson, yeah. Jahmyr Gibbs just feels more like a fit in that Chargers offense, but I could be wrong. It could be Bijan there. But I think Jordan Addison, and then maybe you go ahead and take Jahmyr Gibbs later.
Um, so so for 21 for me for the Chargers, I did not have them going offense because I don't think offense really has been a problem at all for the Chargers last few years. I don't disagree with what you're saying. I think if Eckler gets traded, if they do trade Keenan Allen, I think it certainly would make sense to go an offensive threat here. But if they hold par, keep everyone on the offense, I think you got to go defense. You got
Yeah.
to go defense. They blew how big of a lead against Jacksonville again? I mean, again, Justin Herbert's a quarterback, so he's obviously going to get most of the slack at the end of the day. That defense did not play well. They did not play well at all. And I think Lucas Van Ness could be a solid guy that they could plug in at linebacker for the Chargers. Could fit in right in the middle and be a pretty solid dude for them. You obviously had him going earlier on, so we'll
You have,
see.
you have Van Ness as a middle linebacker then?
I think I say middle linebacker. I think he could be versatile and play a few different spots on the linebacker role. I think a guy that he could potentially learn from a little bit is a Kyle Van Noy type player. Um, we'll see what happens. I think he'll be versatile. I think he'll be versatile. His nickname is Hercules. I don't know if you knew that or not.
He's a big dude, 6'5", 272. That's right. That's where I kind of question the middle linebacker. But I 4'5", 40 maybe.
Yep. I think the size is big, but I think he'll be able to keep up with them a little bit. So we'll see what happens. But pick number 22, Baltimore Ravens. Who do you have Baltimore going with?
So they already kind of addressed this with adding Odell Beckham Jr. But I think you still need another receiver. Odell Beckham Jr. does not solve your problems. He helps make it better. But I think when you're sitting there and you have OBJ and Rashad Bateman, I think if you have a chance to take Zay Flowers from Boston College, you take Zay Flowers. He's a little smaller at 5'9", 182. So maybe some shades of a guy they traded away just last year in Hollywood Brown. He ran a 4.42 40 and was first team All ACC in 2020 and 2022. Yeah, Boston College was a bad team, and he still put up 78 catches for 1,077 yards and 12 touchdowns. I think this guy is a great offensive weapon for Lamar Jackson or Tyler Huntley, whoever's healthy at the time or whoever's on the team at the time. But I think wide receiver is still a big need for Baltimore there. And I could see them going corner as well. If he's still there, maybe you keep Deonte Banks in Baltimore. But I think right now, wide receiver takes Zay Flowers at number 22 if you're Baltimore.
Well, you kind of teased a little bit for me, but I have Baltimore going with Deonte Banks, cornerback out of Maryland. Here,
Nice.
so the Maryland boy staying in the town that he's known for his entire life. Here, we've obviously kind of mentioned him a little bit before, but yeah, I think offense wise, like you mentioned, brought in Odell Beckham Jr. That could be massive. Wide receiver certainly makes sense. I could see them going that route for sure. But I think when the Baltimore Ravens teams have been at their peak is because they've always had a really solid defense. And so I think if you had a guy like Banks playing in front of the hometown team with the hometown fans, that could add another level of I don't know, personal situation for him too, and maybe shine a little bit more than a lot of people might think he will. So we'll see what happens. Next, Minnesota Vikings picking at pick number 23. I've heard a few different ways that the Vikings could go with this pick. I have heard quarterback, I've heard wide receiver, I've heard offensive line, I've heard defense. I've heard just about everything for the Vikings here at pick number 23. But Caleb, who do you have the Vikings going with?
I have them taking Bryce Behringer, punter from Michigan State.
Nice. Nice. Great
I
pick.
thought I could get a new one. No, I think it's a different front office, but as a Vikings fan, I'm sitting there and I'm looking at, remember when there was Aaron Donald sitting there? We passed on him. The concerns were that he was an undersized defensive tackle out of Pittsburgh. I think there's another undersized defensive tackle out of Pittsburgh who, for better or worse, will be compared to Aaron Donald. I think that is a very high standard to hold him to. I think he's his own player, but he ran a 4.67 40, so decently fast for an interior defensive lineman. 6'1", 281 pounds, unanimous All-American and ACC Defensive Player of the Year. I have them going Kalijah Kancey. There's a lot of needs. One could make a very strong argument that they go corner here. I've pretty much exhausted the list of my top corners, so I have them going with a guy at another position of need, and defensive tackle. He had, in the past 2 years, he's had 27 and a half tackles for loss, 14 and a half of those being sacks, and that for 64 total tackles. Best defender in the ACC last year, unanimous All-American. I think, again, it's not the same front office, so they're not going to be held to, well, you guys whiffed on Aaron Donald as well. But as an organization, as a team, we whiffed on Aaron Donald.
Yeah.
And Kalijah Kancey, not saying he will be, but I think it would be a bad look if Kalijah Kancey goes on to be a star for the next decade and we let him slip at number 23. So I'm locking in Kalijah Kancey right there if I'm the Vikings.
Okay. I think defense probably makes the most sense for the Vikings. We obviously saw how Daniel Jones, could do whatever he wanted against that Minnesota Vikings defense in the playoffs last year.
It's
He
true.
could do literally no wrong. Anything that he was doing was working. And you need to change that up a little bit. And I think if you add a guy over the top, that could potentially help a little bit. So I had Vikings going with Brian Branch, safety out of Alabama here. I think shoring it up a little bit on the top end. Obviously, I know you have Harrison Smith back there as well too. But Harrison Smith is not going to be Harrison Smith for forever. He's not the same player he was 5 years ago. And I think eventually you're going to have to get to the point where he's going to have to be gone. So I'm going with him.
I wouldn't say no to Brian Branch, but we're essentially, if we take Brian Branch, the 2023 Vikings essentially have Harrison Smith and 2 other first-round safeties coming in because Lewis Cine was hurt for pretty much the season.
I forgot about him.
So we're getting Lewis Cine back. So that's where I think it would be nice to have a Branch Cine safety combo. But since Harrison Smith has decided to come back to play, I think we can hold off on a safety for at least another year with Lewis Cine coming back. I don't hate the pick, but
I forgot Cine drafted because he was hurt all year because he didn't play. I forgot he was a Minnesota Viking. And who knows? Maybe they go with Branch and say, learn under Smith, because when he, if he does play one more year, then is gone. Then you could roll out that Cine and Branch duo.
I've also seen some boards that have Branch playing corner.
Okay.
And that is also a need for the Vikings. So if you could put him in there, just fit him in somewhere in the secondary, let him develop, and then take over as the true safety once Harrison Smith retires in the next year or two.
Mm-hmm.
That's a solid pick too.
Certainly we'll not be able to go wrong with that. So moving on to Jacksonville Jaguars at pick number 24. Obviously had a really solid year last year, won a playoff game in dramatic fashion against the Chargers, and competed for a little bit there against the Kansas City Chiefs. They were very competitive in that ball game for a while. So who do you have Jacksonville going with at 24 here?
I think ultimately, Trevor Lawrence is the future there. You got to protect him. I think You had them going earlier in this draft. I have them going with Darnell Wright, the offensive tackle from Tennessee, 6'5", 333 pounds, first team All SEC. I think a really good pass protector and somebody that can protect Trevor Lawrence. You gotta, what is it? The first check is the mortgage, and the second is the insurance policy, whatever that line from The Blind Side was.
Yep.
You got to bring in Darnell Wright to protect Trevor Lawrence if he's sitting there.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, I don't mind that. I don't mind that. There's a guy that you mentioned as well earlier too, that I was a massive fan of that is still on the board. And I think you're going to get another defensive guy. They're going to go Nolan Smith out of Georgia. Um, I again talked about how great he did at the combine. I think that would warrant for him getting picked a heck of a lot earlier than pick number 24 in the draft. Um, but sometimes how the draft rolls out, you never know, and he'll may still be around at that time. So that's why I have Jacksonville going there. Absolutely killed it at the combine. Like we said, don't need to beat a dead horse with that, but truly, with some of the injuries that he had this last season, a lot of people maybe didn't have him going first round. And because he killed it at that, um, massive reason why he probably now will be a first round pick. So I'm going 24. New York Giants have the next pick at pick number 25. Who do you have the Giants going with?
So I'll give you both of my picks. I'll give you the one that I scratched off my list when I was typing it up. So at first I have them going Osiris Torrance, the offensive guard from Florida. Can't go wrong there.
Nope, you cannot.
The more I thought about it, the more I was like, I'm going to stick, because I put both of these guys down at first. And then ultimately I decided, nope, got to go with one guy. And that guy is center out of Minnesota, John Michael Schmitz. 6 foot, just under 6'4", comes in at like 6'3.5", 301 pound center, was first team All-American this past year. The way he was able to move people was poetry. Mohamed Ibrahim does not have the years that he had without John Michael Schmitz. Every running back that stepped in the past couple of years, when Mo Ibrahim, Trey Potts, Arkees Irving, Kai Thomas, Bryce Williams, when all of these guys had to step in due to injuries, they knew that they were going to be able to get holes because you had John Michael Schmitz up there paving the way. And I think if you add John Michael Schmitz, that also protects Daniel Jones, but then that also starts to open up more holes for Saquon Barkley. So you could go guard with Osiris Torrance there, but I think they take the center out of Minnesota in John Michael Schmitz.
Okay. I like offensive line. I think Giants probably go offensive line. I didn't have them go offensive line. The only reason was because I was thinking, how fun could it be if they got another receiving threat and they brought in Quentin Thompson, the wide receiver out of TCU. They obviously,
good.
what's that?
Johnson's good.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Johnson, not Thompson. Not Thompson. Not Thompson. But I think obviously them trading for Darren Waller, then their next guy is Darius Slayton. Has some good games here and there. Paris Campbell, I think that's a guy that if he doesn't have some injuries, maybe he has a little bit of a better career than he has had so far. Not to say that he hasn't, but I think injuries have certainly held him back a little bit. I think give Daniel Jones a dude. Isaiah Hodgins, for a large part of the season, was that dude for Daniel Jones last year. And I think if you bring in another receiving target, help that out a little bit, sure up the receiving side of things a little more, that can make things really, really exciting for the Giants. However, that is a heart pick, not picking with the head pick. thinking the head pick probably will be offensive line, but I'm going with Quentin Johnson, wide receiver there. So, division rival Dallas Cowboys picking at 26. Who do you have Dallas going with here?
So this is where I have. Let me just double check that I have this right. Yes, this is where I have my first tight end coming off the board.
Okay.
That's Michael Mayer, the tight end from Notre Dame. You
Okay.
can make it between Kincaid or Mayer for who the top tight end in this draft is.
Okay.
Mayer comes in at 6 foot 4.5 inches, 249 pounds, runs a 4.7 40, consensus All American this past year. Has had 65 plus catches, 800 plus yards, and 7 or more touchdowns in each of the past 2 years. He also had a solid season as a freshman when Notre Dame played in the ACC for a year with
Mm-hmm.
40 catches for 450 yards and a couple touchdowns. I think you really can't go wrong with either Kincaid or Mayer, but I think Mayer's the direction I'm leaning here for Dallas.
Obviously, losing Dalton Schultz, so obviously tight
Yep.
end certainly is a need for Dallas. Um, well, Caleb, it's been a while since we've had a similar pick, but that is done now because I also went with Michael Mayer, tight end out of Notre Dame as well too. Um, I saw a few mock drafts where people went running back. To me, that doesn't make sense for Dallas because getting rid of Zeke is pretty much you saying Tony Pollard's our guy. So why are you going to draft a running back in the first round? You're just saying sorry about it to Tony Pollard. You had a great year last year just to be the backup again. So I don't see that happening. I think tight end is maybe the glaring hole that they need. I could see them maybe going offensive line, but as we know, Jerry Jones, he will always go with the sexy pick, go with the heart pick, and not a bad one too. This is not a bad pick. Like we mentioned, tight end is a position that they need, and depending on who you talk to, either him or Kincaid are the number one, number two tight ends. Like I said, depending on who you talk to with that, but cannot go wrong with it. Guy that can do everything. Tight ends are you need them to do everything. You need them to catch passes, but you also need them to be really, really solid in the blocking game as well too. And he can do that for sure. So glad we both agree on Cowboys 26 here. So 27 Buffalo Bills. Who do you have Buffalo going with?
Well, I can tell you we're not going back to back because you already had this guy picked by a team that already has 2 starting safeties.
Okay.
Uh, I'm going with Brian Branch here. The Bills, they've got a loaded roster. I didn't really see any major holes. So why not take a guy that's versatile, can play the corner, can play the safety role. I believe they lost Jordan Poyer. Um,
I think he's still there. I know there was talks that
there was
he wants
Fox.
to leave.
Yes, yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
Um, Still going to add the versatile corner safety hybrid.
yeah.
I believe he was first team All American in 2022 as like a flex defensive back position. So adding in that kind of versatility, you can never go wrong with that. He's 6 foot tall, 190 pounds. He had 90 tackles, um, 14 TFLs, 3 sacks, 2 picks, and 17 pass breakups last year. I had to just double check and make sure that I pulled the right stat because 14 TFLs for a defensive back is
Yeah,
nuts.
that's insane.
Yeah.
And that still could be a good pick. You know, they have now mentioned um that DeMar Hamlin will be coming back, but who knows? Like, will DeMar Hamlin be able to be slotted right back in? You're playing the whole game again. I don't know. I don't know. That's up for him and the team to figure out. So that still could be a pretty solid pick for sure. I have them going with Will McDonald, the edge from Iowa State there. Um, Again, Buffalo's not a team that has a lot of holes. They really are not. Trust me, I know I play them twice a year, unfortunately, or 3 times in the playoffs, and almost beat them if Skylar Thompson is not playing. Anyways, um, but I have them going with Will McDonald, from Iowa State there for that pick. Um, Really solid guy, really athletic dude. 13 games, 11 starts. 12 games in 2022, 36 tackles, 7.5 for loss. Team high 5 sacks with 4 pass breakups, and being voted a first team all conference player as well too. His player comp that he had was Randy Gregory. Um, Certainly good comp to have there for sure on that. But um, yeah, so Buffalo, I think, Von Miller will be coming back as well too off of injury that he had. So adding him, adding another defensive guy in the draft, could make Buffalo a pretty solid team for sure. Not that they already are not, but loosen up a little screws maybe a little more. Bengals at 28. Who do you have Cincy going with?
I think they tried to protect Joe Burrow, but there's still work to be done there on that offensive line. I have them taking local guy, the 6'8", 374-pound first team All American, DeJuan Jones out of Ohio State to play offensive tackle. Um, the size alone, uh, that's just ridiculously large.
Yes.
But he also paired with Paris Johnson Jr. That was an elite tackle duo. Since he needs to protect Joe Burrow, and why not get the guy from just what northeast of Cincinnati in Columbus, Ohio. So that's my pick there for the Bengals.
Um, Again, this is a pick where probably should go offensive line. I didn't. I have them going another offensive threat, but a guy that could probably will get a lot of work on offensive line, and Darnell Washington, tight end out of Georgia. They obviously brought in Irv Smith.
Mm.
Um, I could see a situation where now, obviously, you're bringing in Darnell Washington. You're drafting a tight end in the first round. You're not just going to draft him just so he strictly only blocks on the offensive line. You want him to have some plays on the offense, but can maybe run a set where you have 2 tight ends out there and have Irv be the main tight end guy. Washington be a guy that, oh, could he block? Could he go out and make a catch? I think that could add some mystery to that offense for Cincinnati. Dude's an absolute unit, 6'7", 264. If he adds another, 20 pounds to him, 15 pounds, maybe we're talking about him being a defensive end or maybe an actual offensive lineman if he has a few more pounds. So,
Or maybe
dude,
a power forward.
what's that?
Or maybe a power forward.
Or power forward in the NBA. For as big as he is, very athletic, ran a 4.64 40, 31-inch vertical, 20-yard shuffle is 4.08 seconds. I mean, this dude is an absolute athletic freak, and he's an absolute unit. So maybe he gets utilized a lot in the red zone game. So we'll see what happens. Saints at 29. Who do you have Nollins going with?
You got 3 tight ends in the first round. That's bold.
I do. I don't think Darnell Washington. I wouldn't be shocked if he doesn't get picked in the first.
Yeah.
He'll probably end up being an early second guy, but who knows?
Uh, but speaking of tight ends, I've got Dalton Kincaid from Utah.
Okay.
Uh, you mentioned earlier. He's 6'4", 246, all Pac-12 this past year. He was also all Pioneer Football League
Oh,
back in, I believe, spring of 2020 with the University of San Diego. Um, for anyone listening in Minnesota, that would be the University of San Diego that St. Thomas plays. He then transferred to Utah, only had 1 catch for 14 yards during 2020, but then broke out 2021 with 36 for 510 and 8. And then this past year with 70 for 890 and 8. Adds a weapon there for Derek Carr. I believe Juwan Johnson is their starting tight end. Decent, not great. Whereas Dalton Kincaid could be pretty great. So just adding a weapon there. You do get Michael Thomas back this year, so that's where I held off on taking a receiver there at 29. Um, there's a lot of ways you could go with this pick, though. New Orleans is not the New Orleans they were 5 years ago.
No, they're not. No, they're not. Obviously, different coaches, new quarterback, Derek Carr at the realm here with that for sure. So we'll see what happens. I actually did have Saints going wide receiver here. I had them going with Zay Flowers, wide receiver out of Boston College. Obviously, touched on him a little bit earlier. My kind of thoughts behind it was Chris Olave, I think at right now is your number one wide receiver. Michael Thomas has not played football the last few years. And that's maybe part of the reason why I especially went Zay Flowers is because who knows if Michael Thomas will be able to play a full season.
Yeah.
And if not, obviously Traquan Smith has had flashes where he's played well, but it would be so much better just to have another guy in there to where then after Traquan Smith, then it's like, okay, well, yeah, look, Rashid Shaheed is your next guy,
Ooh.
Brian Edwards. Um, so it's really not. I mean, that's a massive drop off if Michael Thomas gets hurt, which is very likely because it has happened the past few years. Um, so I have them going wide receiver and Zay Flowers to do things there on that end. So we'll see. Give Derek Carr another target to go throw to. We'll see what happens. Philadelphia Eagles pick 30. What do you have?
Yeah, so I had them going with Bijan Robinson at number 10. Um, they could also go Bijan Robinson at number 30. We really don't know where Bijan Robinson's going to go. So since I already had them taking Bijan Robinson, I think I mentioned this earlier that they need to get a little bit younger on the defensive line. So I have them going with Brian Brzee, the defensive tackle out of Clemson, 6 foot 5.5 inches, 298 pounds, 4.8640, first team All ACC in 2020, second team this past year. As I think you already mentioned, pretty much everything else there is to mention with him. Dude's a baller. Philly would be lucky to have him to pair with Jordan Davis.
We mentioned a lot of Bijan Robinson earlier, where you did not go with him earlier. I did have him going here at 30 to the Philadelphia Eagles. So, whether he goes at 10 to Philly to another team before that, I think if he is on the board at 30, I would be very shocked if Eagles do not go with Bijan Robinson. That would just be a great pick. Lost Miles Sanders, solid guy to throw in there as well too on an offense that's already very elite. And then pick number 31, reigning champs, Kansas City Chiefs. Can do a lot of different things. Who do you have them going with?
So I have them going with the guy you picked just a little bit ago to Buffalo in Will McDonald IV. Bit of a longer college career. He did play 5 years at Iowa State. But in those 5 years, he's been first team All Big 12 each of the past 3 years. He had a little bit of a drop off in production this past year, as in 2020 and 2021. He had 13 tackles for loss in both of those seasons, 10 and a half sacks in 2020, 11 and a half in 2021. But he's been sitting right at about 35, 36 tackles for each of the past 3 years. He did just have 7.5 tackles for loss and 5 sacks this year. That's nothing to really be concerned about when you're talking about a guy that has consistently been putting up numbers. I mean, his career at Iowa State, 125 tackles, 40 and a half of those for loss, 34 of those were sacks, 7 pass deflections in the past 5 years, as well as he's forced 8 fumbles in the past 3 years. Kansas City, they did take George Karlaftis last year,
Yep.
but they still need help on that defensive line there in Kansas City. So I think adding a guy like Will McDonald IV makes sense.
I had Kansas City going receiver here. They lost Juju Smith-Schuster, obviously went to the New England Patriots over there. So I have them going right wide receiver. Not that doesn't matter if whole Patrick Mahomes can make do with whatever he has out there. But I have them going with a guy that the last couple of days I have seen shooting up a lot of draft charts, including mine, and that's going to be Jonathan Mingo, wide receiver from Mississippi. Um, this is a guy that is pretty solid, 6'2", 220. So a bigger dude. Not You're not going to see a lot of special things with a lot of different routes, but he's a big body to where he'll get a lot of opportunities to get a lot of balls tossed up to him to go up there and make the catch, and he'll be able to do that. So he'll be able to make tough catches, get tough after the catch yards, and above average blocker too in the run game. So if you need him to block a little bit, he's able to do that. A lot of people think he has a skill level and the work ethic and demeanor to be a starting slot receiver in the NFL. So again, we saw the Chiefs hit a home run with Isaiah Pacheco late in the draft last year, and not a single person had heard of him. I don't think a lot of people have probably heard of Jonathan Mingo, and maybe this can be last year's Isaiah Pacheco. So we'll see what happens.
You got to
But
pick 30.
anyways, what's that?
You got to pick 32 in yours.
I do not.
Uh,
I do
well,
not.
I had the Steelers going with cornerback Deonte Banks at number 17, with number 32, which is the first pick of the second round. Thanks to the Miami Dolphins tampering, trying to get Tom Brady to come there. So the Steelers got this pick from the Bears in the Chase Claypool trade. And I have them getting some help on the offensive line with offensive tackle Anton Harrison out of Oklahoma. He stands 6'4", 315 pounds, and he ran a 4.98 40. So anytime you see an offensive lineman
Sub
with
five.
a
Yeah.
sub 5, that's pretty good, especially if they're over 300 pounds. I don't know if I could hit a sub 540 anymore. And I'm nowhere near 300 pounds. So I'm also not trying to play offensive line in the NFL, but that's
Very true.
but he was Big 12 in 2022 with the Oklahoma Sooners. So that's some protection for Kenny Pickett. And that concludes my 32 picks.
There we go. All right, folks. Well, hope you like that. It's 2.5 hours here. Still going a little bit though, Caleb. I believe you maybe have some diamond in the rough guys. Yeah. Some guys to look forward to. Maybe guys that probably won't be a first round selection, but second and on is kind of the purpose of this. So let's hear it.
Yeah, so these are some of them even later than second. Actually, I think maybe 1, 2. There's a few of these guys I could see in the second. I'll just go. I've got 4 on offense, 4 on defense. Starting out on offense, I've got a pair of running backs, that being Israel Abanikanda, the running back from Pittsburgh, 5'10", 216 pounds, first team All-American this past year when he ran for 1,400 yards, 20 touchdowns, and then added another $146 and a receiving touchdown in the receiving game. He had some ridiculous games this past year. I believe it was UMass where he ran for like 4 touchdowns, and then he did it again against Virginia Tech. Slightly better defense there with Virginia Tech. Watch out for Israel Abanikanda. If he gets into the right scheme, you talk about this year's Isaiah Pacheco. Israel Abanikanda on 239 carries averaged 6 yards per carry. And this was in the ACC. This wasn't against inferior. I mean, ACC arguably not the greatest conference, but still 6 yards per carry, pretty damn good.
Still got guys in that conference.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Also at running back, this one, I think the best pro comp for him is alumni from the same school, Darren Sproles, and that being Deuce Vaughn, the 5'5", 179-pound running back. unanimous All-American in 2022, consensus All-American in 2021. He's ran for 1,400 plus yards in each of the past 2 seasons, added 370 plus receiving yards in each of the past 2 seasons, has had 43 touchdowns in the past 3 years. This dude, size is an issue. He's only 5'5" and $179. This dude is smaller than I am. I could eat him for breakfast. Not really. Please do not compete me up, Deuce Vaughn. But he's got a very similar style to Darren Sproles, and the past 3 years with the Kansas State Wildcats, that's been the comparison he's got, is Darren Sproles, who had a decently long career as a change of pace running back and return specialist. And that's kind of the same role that Deuce Vaughn would fit into. Moving on, the next 2 are receivers. The first one being Marvin Mims Jr., the wide receiver out of Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
He has a next-gen athletic score of 84. He was first-team All-Big 12, ran a 4.3 840, standing 5'11", 183 pounds. Had 1,000 yards this past season with 6 touchdowns. Should be a solid day 2 guy. And then the last one for offense, this one is probably my biggest sleeper, and that's Andre Yosevich, the wide receiver from Princeton. He is 6'3", 205 pounds, ran a 4.43 40. And here's the other part, standing 6'3", 205. Bet you probably wouldn't have guessed that he had the second fastest 3-cone drill for a wide receiver, with a 6.85.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I would not have guessed that.
The stats, unfortunately, not the greatest, which is also concerning since he played for an Ivy League school where he was first team All Ivy League. This past year, he had 66 catches for 943 yards and 7 touchdowns. And the previous 2 years combined, he had about 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns. Super fast guy. Also runs track. So you can see that in the track speed with the 40 and the 3-cone drill. And he's 6'3", 205. I mean, if the Vikings take him in the mid to late rounds, watch out. Got to get that Yosevich jersey. Moving on to the defense, pretty much have one player at each position. For the defensive line, no defensive tackles. Went with an edge rusher, though, in Nick Herbig, slightly undersized at 6'2", 240. Played for Wisconsin. He was first team All Big 10 this past year. In the past 2 years, he's combined for 30 tackles for loss, 20 sacks, and 108 tackles, as well as 6 pass deflections and 4 forced fumbles in that past 2 years. Hated going against this guy. He was a game wrecker at Wisconsin. I think he should be a good pass rushing specialist for whoever picks him up. Moving on from pass rushing to linebacker, this is more of a coverage linebacker in Dorian Williams from Tulane. 6'1", 228 pounds, ran a 4.49 next gen athletics score of 81, which would be the 5th best for a linebacker. He had, in the past 2 years combined, 205 tackles, 11.5 for loss, 6 sacks, 2 interceptions, 10 pass deflections, and 2 forced fumbles. This dude was all over the field in the American Athletics Conference. Really solid coverage linebacker. We'll see where he goes. Moving on to the defensive backfield, we have cornerback Julius Brents from Kansas State. Ran a 4.53 40, standing 6'3", 198 pounds. So kind of that prototypical corner size. Speed could be a little bit better, but that's not bad with that kind of frame. In the past 2 years, he has combined for 94 tackles, 6.5 for loss, 5 interceptions, 6 pass deflections, and forced a fumble. We'll see where he ends up, but he is a guy in the later rounds that I could see being taken as a project that we see starting by 2025.
Okay.
Lastly is Sidney Brown, the safety from Illinois, 5'10", 211 pounds, next gen athletics score of 89, which was number 1 for safeties. 75 overall, which would put him as the 5th best overall safety. Ran a 4.47 40, was first team All Big Ten in 2022. And he had 60 tackles this past year, 81 the year before, 6 interceptions this year, 7 pass deflections, a fumble recovery, a forced fumble, and 2 defensive touchdowns. Illinois' defense was not playing around under Brett Bielema this past year, and Devon Witherspoon kind of stole all the headlines. Yeah.
Deservedly so, for sure. He's a dog.
Oh,
yeah.
For sure. But Sidney Brown, kind of like Kirby Joseph last year, slept on a little bit. Low-key, kind of nice for the Lions this past year.
Yeah.
So look for teams to be looking at Sidney Brown for safety, because after Brian Branch and Antonio Johnson, you have guys like J.L. Skinner from Boise State. Sidney Brown is very much right up there for the number 2 safety conversation after Brian Branch, of course. So those are my
Minnesota Viking. Yeah.
I mean, if Minnesota Viking in the 3rd round, I'll take that.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, thanks, Caleb. I appreciate, as always, you always give great insight and do your research, especially on the diamond and the rough type players. It seems like you definitely hear at least a name or two of that group every year that you've done this for us. So certainly appreciate it. But do you have any kind of final thoughts, things that you want to add? Anything you want to shout out or any of that?
I mean, just hoping that our guys, Terrell Smith and Jordan Howden from the University of Minnesota, both get drafted. They're both kind of in that conversation. Howden being a safety, the one who sealed the game against Penn State in 2019 with the interception. And then Terrell Smith, super fast corner. Both of them in that conversation for day 3 or priority undrafted free agents. Just hoping that they get drafted, get a good opportunity, and we'll see where Mo Ibrahim goes. Not too concerned about John Michael Schmitz. He might not be a 1st-round pick to the Giants like I projected, but I would be a little surprised if he makes it past the 2nd round. Dude was 1st-team All-American, was a big reason for the success Minnesota's had in the run game the past few years.
I think a team needs to draft John Michael Schmitz 1 round, get Ibrahim a 2nd round, so you can keep that duo going a little bit longer. Help break up the middle of the field.
I'm not going to say no.
Perfect. Well, again, Caleb, go ahead. What are some socials? What are some things that the folks can follow you at?
So you can find me on LinkedIn, Caleb Sipe. That's CALEB SIPE. And that's really it for the social media these days. Really cut back the past few years after starting MSP Athletics with John Overn. It's kind of time has come to move on from that. So yeah, not really putting it out there for free. So you're one of the lucky ones.
Oh, well, I appreciate it. Thank you very much, sir, for being one of the lucky ones for that. But anyways, folks, you want to follow myself, you can follow me at Lucas_Dorton. If you want to follow Nick on Twitter at Doetkott, and if you want to follow our podcast page, it is at DND_podcast, capital D's, capital P, for that as well, for sure. But anyways, folks, certainly we appreciate you if you stuck around this long. Really appreciate it. This is certainly my every year probably one of my favorite podcasts to do, just because I love diving into it, love doing the research on the guys who are going to get picked and be the future of the NFL for hopefully the next decade or so. So we'll see what happens. But anyways, certainly do that. Follow that, like, comment, share. Let us know what you think. If you want to be on a show, certainly let us know. We'd love to have you. But anyways, Caleb, once again, thank you tremendously for
Row the
coming
boat.
on. Row the boat, flexing the guns a little bit. But anyways, um, as
Go
for
Rebels.
myself, oh, boo, no. As for myself and for Caleb Sipe, until the next time we see each other for episode 71, we are out.